Hello, you are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby Podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers discussing all things rugby through the lens of Leinster and Ireland. This is episode 120, and predominantly it's going to be a preview show looking ahead to the action this weekend. If you want to catch reviews of the games from a couple of weeks ago, look to episode 119 from last week. But as it is, we have a lot of top quality test match footy to look forward to this weekend, and we're going to start with the Six Nations, which is the big one. We have the first Friday night game coming up this weekend when France travel to Cardiff to keep their Grand Slam hopes alive. That should be a great game to kick things off. And then on Saturday we got Scotland travelling to Rome to face Italy, and we have England hosting Ireland in a really crunch match for both of them. The two of them with winning records going into it, but both with their title hopes on the line as that one goes ahead. So really good games in the Six Nations this week.
Absolutely. Crunch time in the Six Nations as all the fans will be watching it. But it's crunch time as well in Rugby Europe as the World Cup qualifiers come to a close over the next couple of weeks in Europe. There are two huge games going on. Georgia travelling to Bucharest to play Romania. Georgia could wrap up rugby the Europe 1 spot for the World Cup with a win there. It's the game that often, if not always, decides the outcome of that competition. Romania as well, a win against the Georgians would be huge for their qualification campaign and would put Europe 2 right back in the driver's seat for them. And then obviously this huge game, this massive derby in Iberia between Spain and Portugal. It's going to take place in Madrid. Two lightning quick teams. It's looking like winner takes all in that one. Going to be a great game, and we're going to dig into that later on in the show as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're also going to touch on the under-20s tournament, which has been going alongside with the Six Nations as well. We'll mention the action there and look forward to that. And before we wrap up international footy and pivot into the club game, and we'll start in Europe there with the top tours, the URC and the Premiership, and the action from last weekend, and looking ahead to some of the action this weekend. And before we look further afield to club rugby happening all around the world, with the MLR in the States, with League One in Japan, SLAR in South America resumes this weekend as well. We'll look ahead to that, and before pivoting onto Super Rugby Pasifika as well, which has already produced a couple of cracking games as well. Fiji and Drua got their first win at the weekend in their first home game. That was a good one. We'll touch on all of that. We'll also mention Super Rugby Aupiki, which is the women's Super Rugby tournament that's kicking off in New Zealand this weekend as well, or actually this Thursday as well. And we're going to touch on all that club rugby before we wrap up the show with the news of the week.
Absolutely, as we do. Remember, if you do enjoy the show, if you have any thoughts on it, please do get in touch with us, engage with the channel, like the videos, do share with your rugby loving friends if you're a fan of our long form rants, etc., and you think they might be too. And in the main as well, drop into the comment section, give us your opinions. We do cover a lot of stuff. Which bits are you interested in? How do you like our new frame, all zoomed in? Are we? I don't even know. I can't see him. Is it just my nose that's in frame? I don't know. But let us know all your thoughts on the show down below as well. We do like to get a good, interesting conversation about the rugby going in the comments. So do engage there.
Yep. But without any more of that ado, we are going to get into the show and get it underway. And as we said, we're going to start in the Six Nations as well. And rounds 4 and 5, the business end of the Six Nations, crunch time as we were billing it. It's very much upon us. Both of the gap weeks are done. It's time for that sprint to the finish now, and there are 3 horses really still in the race and still in the running, but one very much out in front with France obviously still on for the Grand Slam. As we mentioned, if you want to see our reviews of the previous games, look to previous podcasts, but for this one we're just going to highlight where we are at the moment going into rounds 4 and 5. And as mentioned, France on top, still on for the Grand Slam, only 1 point dropped of the possible bonus points as well, so that's very good shooting from them. And England and Ireland still in the hunt, but facing each other this weekend, so only one of them will be standing next week.
That's it. It was Wales who fell away last weekend, and Scotland with their unfortunate defeats the last time out. So 5 became 3. This week 3 will become 2. As Ireland play against England, the winner takes all in that one as far as going into the last weekend. For England, it's all in their hands. A win this weekend, they can make it a showdown in Paris for the Six Nations title. It is in their hands from where they are. and for Ireland's point of view, obviously they're going to need a little bit of help, but they're in a great position if they become a 4-win team to take the title that way if France do slip up.
That's it, indeed, yeah. But without any more of that ado, we're going to get into the previews for this weekend, and we're going to do them in chronological order. We're going to look ahead first to Friday night, where the first Friday night game of the year, and what a game it is. Wales v France in Cardiff in the Millennium Stadium, or the Principality Stadium as it is now. Always a cracking game between these two, and now a lot on the line. There's pride to play for if you're a Welshman. There's definitely a Grand Slam and more to be playing for if you're away, if you're in France colours as well. But this game is going to be cracking. As I mentioned, it's Friday evening, 8 o'clock kickoff, so evening game, refed by Matthew Carley, an Englishman there with the whistle, and Jaco Piper, Andrea Piardi are the ARs on the touchline, with Tom Foley in as the TMO for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a big game, this one. I always love the Friday night games. They give that kind of that just prime time feel to them. The late night vibes, especially now they haven't been able to close the roof off, but they're going to get the natural darkness to be able to put on a bit of a light show. It's just going to be a different kind of atmosphere out in Cardiff.
The crowd is always like into it from before the opening whistle when it's 8 o'clock on a Friday evening in Cardiff. Anyway, you know,
it's just different. It's just going to hit different. This game is going to be huge. From Wales's point of view, obviously they're out of this competition. But if they do end the season with back-to-back wins, they can come away with a lot of momentum here. Obviously they just had that terrible performance at the start of the year against Ireland, but since then bounced back brilliantly against Scotland and showed all of their kind of wily quality, even in the absence of all of the injured players that they've had, to nearly pip England and to outscore them 3-1 in that game. There's a lot to build from, and if they can come here, like obviously they've Italy the last weekend, but this is a home game in front of their home fans, and it will change the whole complexion of their season. If they get a win in this one, all of a sudden things are looking up for Wales. People were writing them off pre-tournament, and yet again they'd be right back in the swing of it, even though their title defence did fall by the wayside last week in Twickenham. A win here does turn it all around for them, and they need a bit of momentum because they're touring South Africa in the summer, and that starts to home into view as soon as the Six Nations fades away.
Very true. They could do with a nice home win and a chance to do them dirty, do France dirty, which they kind of return the favour from last year as well in terms of just scuppering Grand Slam hopes. That would be a nice feather in the Welsh cap if they can manage it. Just a bit of colour on the fixture itself. France and Wales have actually played each other at rugby union since 1908, so a while now, a long and storied history. A total of 101 matches have been played between them. Wales have won 51, France 47, and 3 of them have finished as draws. That's kind of skewed by the early kind of fixtures, because the first, I think, 18 of 19 matches in the Five Nations Championship were Wales wins before France were actually expelled from the tournament in 31 for a wee while and then came back in. But since they rejoined the competition, they've won 46 of the 82 matches played, so it's been very tight throughout their history, really. And the more recent record is kind of the more telling one. I mean, like the teams have also met a few times at outside of the Six Nations. In the World Cup they've met twice. Both have dumped each other out at both stages, so they're just trading blows. The most recent World Cup meeting was Wales dumping France out in Japan, which was in the quarter-final there, and that was obviously a tight and contentious game. But since that date, they've played 3 times in the Six Nations, with France winning all 3, including, as we were alluding to last year, kind of a late Bruce Doolan moment to deny Wales the Grand Slam. So that's very fresh in Welsh memories as well. It
is, no doubt it is. They've been mentioning it in their build up to the game in camp this week. It has been on their minds. It was a heartbreaker for them. It took the slam away. They were well in that game, but so they will be confident or at least determined to come back out with a bang and take it to this French team. But France, meanwhile, are not playing for pride. They're not playing to ready themselves for a summer tour. They're playing for silverware. They are the form side in Test footy right now, looking absolutely brilliant. They're just 2 games away from doing what they haven't done yet and adding silverware to it, ending a 12-year drought. They're as close, it seemingly, as they've been in that time, really, to going and claiming that crown. And I think they'll be absolutely buzzing to get after this Welsh team that's already slipped up in 2 games and to set up that showdown in Paris against the English to finally right that wrong. I mean, this is all about business for France.
It is, they need to arrive to the pitch and go out there and do a job. And I'm sure guys like Sean Edwards returning to Cardiff as well, he'll be determined that they're all marching to his tune and arriving without without a hint of kind of, jaded energy or anything like that. They want to be starting ferociously, which to be fair, they have made a habit of in this tournament already. They've been starting really all guns blazing, where Wales have been a bit sluggish, so they'll be hopeful to hit the ground running in Cardiff as well. Here we are just going to look ahead to both sides as we do, and look at the winning conditions for both, and we're going to start with the home team, the hosts, which is Wales. And what do they need to do to try and unstick this French juggernaut that has so far in the tournament proven too much for all comers, and starved of the momentum that Wales normally like to carry into crunch fixtures like this. It's going to have to come from somewhere else, but primarily, you're looking at that pack and thinking, what can they do? Do they have the kind of courage and the quality needed to contain that massive group of Frenchmen and the ones that are on the bench to come off for France as well for the full 80 minutes? It's going to have to start there in that contact zone, and I think they are aware of it. We are shooting this on a Tuesday now, and we've got some squad updates. There have been guys coming in. Navidi has come in as well. Obviously, Faletau was back last week. They're obviously concerned with some of their just breakdown return, I would imagine, over the last 3 games.
I mean, it has been rough. Some new faces aren't going to hurt at all. I mean, as far as their squad is concerned, most of it is fairly settled. There's a little bit of a quibble about potentially the 13 shirt. Watkins' form is great, but his fitness that they're unsure of. Might be Jay Davis, might be Watkin. Doesn't change the system too much either way. It will be Tompkins in 12. He's been so good. And then on the edge, there's been a bit of a debate, at least amongst Welsh rugby fandom, between Cuthbert and Louis Rees-Zammit, who made a real claim for it, scoring a worldie of a try for Gloucester at the weekend. He did.
It's kind of a philosophical difference, those two wingers.
Yeah, indeed. I think personally I'd be going for the young buck out of those, but they'll probably stick with Cuthbert. But the real debate, the real intrigue is in that back row. There've been all kinds of thoughts about, I think you're thinking Faletau has the 8 shirt, but then it could be Jack Morgan and Tane Basham, as it has been. Navidi could come into the team. They were talking about Seb Davis potentially coming in. They have dumped Ellis Jenkins out of the squad after his great November last year. It just hasn't happened for him. But it'll be interesting to see who they go for either way. There's kind of a horses for courses element. The guys that are picked have to deliver on a level that they probably haven't all tournament.
That's kind of it, is that regardless of the personnel that they do end up going for, the job has to be done, and it hasn't really been thus far. That's been the main concern, and that's why you're looking at guys like Beard, like Wyn Jones, that are pretty much stalwarts in that pack, and they're going to need to deliver a performance that's going to generate good ball for them to work with, because they've started slow against the top teams in every single matchup they've had, and they've really struggled to retain their own ball for large periods as well against these dogged kind of defences that are going after them at the breakdown. And France are no different. This France team have been tenacious, more so even than England or Ireland, who did kind of have their way with Wales at that breakdown area.
You look at that 9-0 deficit that they managed to accrue against England very expensively in the opening stanzas of that game. They were all offensive penalties in their own half, and they were consequent. Some of them were just on setting up a kick. Like those are really sloppy. They've got to mind the breakdown in that sense. France are going to be hitting those rucks. They've got to be well aware of it. They've got to resource those rucks. And really, like, when you're talking about working this offense, there is some encouraging stuff there. Like, there's obviously some great talent. We know what they can do when they get it to the edges. Josh Adams, be it Cuthbert or Rees-Zammit, there's lethal offensive footy to be had there. Likewise in Liam Williams, Tompkins and Bigger between them are going to be the real fulcrums of trying to get them wide, sharp passing, trying to get outside Fiku and really expose them there. But they do, in my view, need to cap it at like 3 phases, especially when it's in their own half, and at times not even 3 phases. They have to be very, very mindful of protecting the ball, deceptive about where they're going with it, such that they can resource the rucks and clear them quickly. And then if it's not there in a few phases time, you're looking to kick, you're looking to put the ball up in the air. You saw that Scotland had some purchase the more that game went on against Jaminet in those areas.
You'll fancy that matchup in the aerial game. Liam Williams and Jaminet should be good for Wales.
Is different from everyone else's in that it's not necessarily been great off set pieces, and it's not really how they unpick teams, and they're not really a well structured, coordinated offense that's going to unpick you in that way, generate a line break and do things that way. Like, most of their scores come from these kind of chaos scenarios where you've generated a penalty, it's a quick tap, there's a broken defence, and you just kind of see an opening or a chance to score. And so actually generating those chaos opportunities off the big box kicks could be a real in for them. And that's probably something that they're going to look at. You generate a chaos ball, you go for it again, you get Tompkins on the ball, you work it for a couple of phases. As soon as the French defence is set, we're kicking again. We're going to pin you back, we're going to take you on in the aerial game, which is our best matchup against you. Scotland tried the same thing, and when you kick loosely, it's very, very dangerous. You got to kick accurately. But for me, that is their best in offence. They are a kick first kind of team. They've got Bigger and Liam Williams in the team as their fulcrum. That's kind of where they have to go, I think those, to get up the field. Yeah, true. I think it'll be more contestable than what Scotland are tending to do in terms of kind of kicking for grass more so slightly different way of applying the kicking game. But definitely, those ideal matchups are things like Liam Williams in the air versus Jaminet or someone, and hopefully you can get purchase in that regard. They will need to access the wide channels through the passing game as well. It can't all be kicking, and to be honest, if they are repelled to the point where they kind of are out of ideas and just kicking non-proactively, that's not a good sign. It's a subtle distinction with difference, but they will ultimately, like you saw during that comeback in the second half against England, that they do have the capability to go through, find some great scores when they need them, and they just need to start with a bit more endeavour. Like, it can't leave Adams as starved of good ball as he has been over really the past few games, particularly the Ireland game, but also even in that first half in England. He was a frustrated man on the wing, not really getting any service, and I think Tompkins is, you were right to highlight, kind of a key man for that, because with that Sean Edwards defence around the ruck and their ferocity in the ruck, sometimes it might be one or two pass plays that are needed to try and find a bit of purchase out there that does engage the Fiku defence. So that's why you got to bring depth, like Ireland did in Paris in the second half. They adjusted by bringing a lot more depth to deal with that line speed. Wales at the moment aren't playing slickly enough to deal with that line speed, and they don't have the ferocity and the carry to really manage that. So you are talking about, like, obviously the enforced 20 metre gap at a line out or 10 metre gap at a scrum is a good opportunity to do that. But in the main, I think you're talking about holding your depth, trying to get those wide passes. But even then, the French drift is so good that I think you are looking ultimately at attacking kicks, using your midfield offense to work the pendulum, and then trying to be clinical when you're in the red zone. And for me, most of their offense is going to happen in the red zone, with Thomas Williams driving that hard tempo, and that great pass to Josh Adams, flashing it past a number of players, just trying to look to space, accessing those areas, stretching the French, hopefully forcing a penalty, quick tapping the penalty, or finding a way to score. But I think most of the management and most of Wales is in this game is just to kind of manage that midfield game such that they generate more red zone opportunities than the French. Yeah, that's true, and that leads into discipline as a key point as well, because they've been on the wrong side of the penalty count in most of the crunch times, or the crunch minutes of these top tier matchups against these kind of really high level teams this year. They haven't really been able to deal with the pressure, deal with the physicality, and then that's manifested itself in some sloppy penalties. You were highlighting ones on their own offensive breakdown to give England cheap scores, but it's been happening kind of. They've been leaking penalties even as far back as autumn as well with the All Black game. They were just a little sloppy in certain areas, and they can't afford to be here. You want to limit cheap French entrances, because this France side are actually very, very good, very proficient at striking off set pieces just into the red zone, or just in the middle third, verging on the red zone. So you've got to kind of be mature enough to end up on the right side of that. You will have to soak some pressure, but try and keep your P's and Q's in order. It's such a crucial thing for the margins are so small in these kinds of matchups that it can snowball very, very quickly on you. And for Wales, they definitely need to keep themselves in it by getting just on the right side of that referee in that regard. And then on the defensive side as well, dealing with what is a frightening France juggernaut of an offensive unit coming their way. Big tests for guys like Tompkins in that Fiku role of shutting down the outside. Yeah, they've had both centres kind of working as 13s on either edge, and to be fair to them, they've held their width really, really well throughout this championship. It was a real problem for England, who were kind of inherently lateral in what they were trying to do the other week. And Wales held their own against it. That defence didn't give up a try in that whole game, despite giving way in territory and in possession. They held their own around the 22 very well, and I think they should be confident about their ability to shut down the outside, maintain their width, that element of the defence is in good shape.
Yeah.
I think the big question really is what happens on the inside when Dupont and his big runners are trying to come at you around the corner, around the corner. That is where you're talking about your guys like your Wyn Joneses and your Adam Beards, but the whole tight five, Rowlands, who's the big hefty unit who's in there, Seb Davies might be coming into the team. These guys need to make huge tackles and huge plays, like just in moments, getting hands in, being like obviously being legal as you say, but being just spoily enough that you can slow it down, keep it slow, and being up to the physical fight of being able to stand up to Antonio
comes around
and
the
then
corner with
Aldrich
him, so latching onto him, like that's a hell of a lot of unit coming through.
What did Wales do? What did how did Edwards deal with that when Wales were an outsized team? They did low chop and jackals. They caught teams, and they'd catch teams if the latcher goes off his feet. Those kind of things, those kind of wily defensive plays where you think they're going to be outmatched, but they're playing with enough hustle. They know what to do. They make the right. They tackle in the right ways where you're getting low, chopping the runner down, getting hands in, slowing the ball up as best as you can, and frustrating the French. Maybe generating a couple of defensive penalties. That's where your heroic plays are going to come in from whoever is in the team, Faletau, or Wyn Jones, or one of these guys
will have
to make it a play.
Yeah, and like you're right in saying, just get a turnover penalty if it's going, but get the hands in first and foremost. Just make France go through rucks, go through phases, rather than getting the ball
make
out.
It messy for
make
Dupont,
it messy, like a
chop
chop and jackal approach is perfect, because you chop them down, and then the person who's nearest get in there and make it a ruck as soon as you can. Don't allow Dupont to just kind of willy-nilly get it out, or allow the forwards to be like flicking it out of the contact zone and discombobulating your defence by doing that, because France are very dangerous. It's like, even if you're not going to get the penalty, be satisfied that you've created the ruck, and then stay legal within that. Don't go for it if it's not going to go. Don't go in for a jackal if you can see that the tackler's still there and going to get pinned for not rolling. Be a bit more savvy and a bit more knowledgeable that like the first job is you've got him to deck, you've created a ruck, that's grand. Now you're giving your defence time. If you're still in there, be contested, be competitive, but keep your feet. Don't flop over and do something silly and kill it, because it's like all that good work can be undone, and like 6 or 7 really good defensive phases or defensive sets can be undone by just a cheap pen. So mind your P's and Q's in that area. But yeah, crucial that they are up to that fight in that tight area around the ruck where Dupont is going to be prowling, and all those French forwards are going to be rolling, and you got to be rolling your sleeves up and using that energy from the crowd. Friday night, Cardiff, loud noise, every big hit that you put in proactively is going to be welcomed with like a massive cheer, and you can feed off that and try and make the French shrink in that context.
The French are carrying a lot of momentum at the moment. They're nigh on impossible to stop, and they're starting games at this blistering speed, full of confidence. If Wales can generate, like, it's just 1 or 2 big plays early doors, winning a high ball, going down the field, on if it's a defensive set they're facing, slowing them down, generating one big jackal or one big chop or forcing one big offensive penalty by being sly and going in for a jackal and then backing off and the guy comes flying in, you get a penalty that way. All of those kind of little hustles that you can do to repel what is a formidable offense, then the game changes. If France don't get their quick start, all of a sudden, instead of carrying all that momentum, it might dawn on them that they're actually under a lot of pressure as well, and that if they blow this situation from where they are here in terms of actually winning the tournament, having beaten Ireland, having gone and won in Murrayfield after Scotland were a bugbear for them for so long, a chance to bring it back to Paris for a Grand Slam. Like, they have to win this game, and the longer it goes on that Wales are clinging on like they so effectively do, the more that pressure might end up starting to mount on the French. So it's just about staying in the game, making big plays early doors, and getting to kind of half time into kind of an even game, generating that kind of tit for tat infield, midfield kicking game, ironing out a couple of penalties and taking 1 or 2 tries in key moments. That is the Welsh picture.
It is definitely the Welsh picture. It's a few key things have to go right. You know, the set piece, they're under pressure, and by my estimation in both set pieces they're going to be under pressure, but they're going to need to be sharp and be accurate.
They have a good line out in scrum. They do.
They should fancy trying to contest the French ball, I think, because the French do have a good maul when they get it going, but they don't go to it as often, and they aren't quite as lethal off their maul drive as they are just off the top, clean attacks from the middle third. So I think guys like Beard should be trying to make it a bit more messy than that, try and make it not as clean.
And they'll presumably have had words with the ref about encroachment and all that kind of stuff, because as much as their line out seemed to malfunction last week, they do have a good line out. They just weren't wily enough to kind of to be aware of what England were at. And I think the presence of Alan Wynne-Jones, even just in an off-field capacity back in there,
coach,
is likely to give them some good line-out juju going into this one as well.
Sure. But from that is the Welsh picture, and geez, a lot of things do need to go right, but it is in Cardiff, so you never write the Welsh off in Cardiff at all, and on a Friday night it could go their way. But from France's point of view, they do not want any of those things to go. They want to keep their momentum rolling on through this. It's a useful asset in the Six Nations, is just having a bit of momentum and a bit of a win streak to carry in. They're going to use it to try and conquer Cardiff and try and silence the crowd, and if they can carry on starting the way they have in all three of the games as well, just hit the ground running with some really blistering offensive sequences and try and be as dynamic and physical as they are, and use their full kind of attributal advantages that they do have in the pack, throw their weight around from very early on, do so in an accurate fashion, then they should be able to try and edge this one from the early one, and from the early off kind of diffuse the crowd factor by getting on top, and then calm themselves down from that pressure that you were alluding to.
Absolutely. As far as the squad is concerned, it is a very settled squad. They have, they're unlikely really to waver from what they've been doing in anywhere. I would care to venture if there's mentality. One or two changes, I'd be surprised. The only thing is that it's Tuesday evening as we're shooting this, even though you guys are seeing it later in the week. That's just the way it falls this week for us. So we don't actually have the teams, and there was a report where we are now that Dupont picked up a knock in training and stayed out of training, took a blow to his bicep and was icing it, but we're not sure at this stage if it's serious. It appears not. It appears that he'll probably play, but as it was in the Tuesday session, it was Luku who slipped into scrum half, and they got Kuyu on the bench as well. So as much as missing a Dupont factor is big, if that is the way it goes out, it doesn't actually change the way they play too much, where they are still trying to generate that rhythm and tempo.
And the quality of the other halfbacks behind is very, very good anyway. It'll just become less of a focal point because they don't have a Dupont if they don't. But I'd imagine, as it looks now, I would imagine they will be going with Dupont. Even if he's stitched together, they'll try and throw him out because he is that talismanic for him. But yeah, certainly in terms of their form, their attack looks very, very sharp at the minute. That is with Dupont, but also just in general, the running lines off Fiku out wider, off Jamine out even wider is just brilliant. The wingers look very dialed in to grabbing scores when they're there, and they showed that in Murrayfield last week or a couple of weeks ago.
Well, they had a bunch of different types of tries. They had a lovely set piece move with Fiku and Dante putting it through the hands to open up the space out wide, turn Chris Harris inside and out. Then they had a great kick return try, and they also had plenty of turnover tries towards the tail end of the game as well. But yeah, I think early, like you were looking at the Welsh kicking game that we were talking about from a Welsh point of view, like what Dupont did at the start of that game, a loose kick from Finn Russell. It didn't even look that loose. It looked like a good pressure kick that was just by sheer quality and explosiveness turned into a catastrophic play, and it was France just changing the name of the game with their sheer ability, and that was like
transition play will be so key, because they know that a similar, if slightly different kicking challenge and aerial challenge will be presented by Wales if they can punish them with plays like that Dupont play, or plays like the Jamine 50-22 from that game as well, that yielded another set piece strike move that yielded another score. Exactly the way to punish the Welsh game plan for being a little bit, a little bit too patient, a little bit kind of too willing to kick the ball to France, which it can and is a very dangerous policy, and France will be determined to illustrate why in Cardiff.
If they can dominate the backfield and the air, they will win this game. I have no doubt. Like, that is Wales' number one in. They do have a lot of quality in Liam Williams. They do have some good kicks. They probably will take one or two of them, but it's a question of just being sharp enough to completely punish those kicks that are loose, to find your broken field runners, to be like they have such good offensive instincts. It's just a question of folding around at speed to support the player, to open up spaces and channels once you're on kick return. And then for like if you're tackled to the ground after first phase, like sometimes Dupont will just take off, you got to support him then, but you're generally trying to create a blistering speed towards the open field in 2 or 3 phases if you can off kick return, to try and catch the Welsh and really just sort of open that defence up before it's allowed to set into any kind of structured shape.
That's it. They're so expert, and they really do hold their depth very, very well, and pick sumptuous lines off one another when the field is broken like that. So yeah, if they can create those kinds of opportunities for themselves, they'll be delighted. But primarily as well, just in the middle third, they'll stay calm. Edwards will be determined on that they should be calm and proactive on the defensive side as well. Like their offense is great, but the defense is probably what will yield them the opportunities to go through that and the opportunities to kick the corner and get their line out, which has been very good. Woki has been a revelation this season in their line out and just securing their ball and making a mess of other people's ball. And then the scrum is just so mighty with Antonio and Willemse on one side. Like, they know they have attributes in those set pieces, so they should be confident of, you know, setting up little kicks down to Wales for them in their own territory, pin them back a little bit, and trust that defensive wall, because Wales have struggled offensively by and large against these top level ones, and they'll just look to present that similar picture and be very ferocious in contact and feed off those mistakes. If they can pressure the halfbacks proactively on the defence, then suddenly their kicking game will be a bit less proactive and a bit more reactive, and that's where you'll get those chances to counter that they love so well.
Absolutely. And when they are setting up those offensive sets in the Welsh half, we talked about it a little bit when we were talking about Wales. Wales' defence very impressive, particularly around their own 22 and their own red zone.
True.
Maintaining the width of the field. So you're looking at the kind of tries that France have scored in the red zone, where they're flashing it wide this way and that. Those tries might not be as there for them. Wales might be prepared. You know, you do back the defensive instincts. I know Harris was turned inside out, so they always have the quality to do it if they have a good scheme up and a good plan.
Sure. Yeah.
But actually, the best in for them could be that kind of
just around the ruck.
Like power game. Like even little tip-ons. Like if Wales are overloading, you've got you were saying like Antonio and Willemse around the corner, just a little tip on to an Aldrich, leaves him one-on-one against a static defender.
Yeah, sure. They scored one like that last week as well. Just roll the contact, get the hands free, and then crash over around the ruck. It does nothing fancy, but the matchups are very good for France in that tight five area.
And you know Dupont is, or like even if it is Luku, but Dupont obviously, hopefully and primarily, is going to generate that blistering tempo. He's got a great read and a great feel around the rucks. Even if there's a Welsh jackler in there, he's going to wrestle the ball off him. You can disjoint that defense with your power runners around the middle and really just be relentless. It wouldn't surprise me to see France go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phases all around the ruck, all going forward, and really just force Wales to come in before they go
then
wide.
Maybe a Pinot try for no effort at all. He'll just be hanging out there and glide in. But
surely it starts down the middle first. That's where Wales are soft, and Ireland kind of exposed that as well with their own forward interplay.
This is it. They'll be expecting, like, Wales will probably chop them a few times and maybe jackal a few times. They'll need to be there not just to run optimistic offload lines, but resource their own rucks a few times. But they'll, you know, if they can win 2 or 3 contacts in a row and then get the hands free through it, that'll be the way through this defence. That is pretty tight and does stay connected as well. So they'll have to earn that right to go wide, as you said.
Physical, It is physical and speedy. Like Dupont will get the tempo going, then you've just got to get those physical carries going. And then just a little bit of deception, just one little tip on or one little inside ball that'll catch them off guard, and that could be enough with the quality they have.
The trappings of that system are to be a little bit off on the tempo, be maybe a little bit slow because you're determined to go around the corner and impose yourself physically like that. Don't allow it to be that slow. Don't allow them to get kind of isolated around the corner as well when you're doing that. Just be like, bring that tempo, be ferocious onto the line like that.
They have been all year. They have been that dialed in, focused, quick to fold entity so far this year, and it's just more of the same, really.
That's it. Keep the foot on the accelerator from a France point of view on both sides of the pill as well, because they will really fancy the matchups, particularly across the back line, but also like in the forwards, just in terms of if the forwards can win their contacts when they're defending them and when they're rolling over them, then the backs will probably follow suit. We saw that with the Ireland game, was a good example of that. Like little Villiers manhandling Hugo Keenan kind of thing, Fiku manhandling anyone he shoots up on, and balling all tackles on Tompkins will go a long way to unsticking whatever it is Wales are plotting to do with the ball and forcing kind of back foot kicks from them that are much more easy to defuse if you're a Jaminet. It's just it all coalesces if they do arrive to that pitch and be able to put down that physical marker that, to be honest, the team sheets would suggest that France do have that edge there. It's about
they've been incredible so far. They've been incredible. The way that they've been able to, particularly on the defensive end, just make absolute shite of the opposition ruck.
That's true. It's so there for them. That, like, Sean Edwards, as he was deliciously welcoming a much touted Irish offense to Paris to kind of do a job on them, so too will he not as much as a touted one, but just looking at the way Wales have been resourcing their own rucks with the pill, even ones that are like setting up kicks, as you were saying. that should be such fodder for an Edwards defence to just get after, and such easy motivation for him to pin to the notice board and get them kind of determined to make an absolute mess of a nightmare of retaining possession for Wales and force them to kick it to you.
They have been exceptional this year. Like, we're not lying when we say they're the form side in World Rugby now. I mean, the Springboks and the All Blacks will have their form coming in later in the year, and obviously it's all building up to the World Cup next year. True. But they look incredible right now on the offense, on the defense, the size of them, the skill of them. They're playing with ferocity and focus. If they bring the same energy and the same focus that they have
and
brought,
just the same quality,
they will win this game. I don't doubt that. The only problem is if they're just, like, if they start fast but then all of a sudden they're kind of kicking a few 3-pointers and then they switch off, then it's like if they take, for example, a 6 or a 9-0 lead and then they think it's going easy
on
and
the
then
restart.
Just cough up a penalty, like a little moment where they just fall asleep and aren't quite as focused as they have been. We haven't really seen many glimpses of it so far in this year's competition. Maybe a little wobble in the third quarter against a very good Irish team.
Sure.
But outside of that, like, they've been they've been brilliant, really, and even in that Ireland team they rallied really well towards the end and nearly took a try to take the losing bonus point away from Ireland. But it's just in those moments, like, if those old French issues creep back, where like all of a sudden this is a game, they don't have that bad a record against Wales, they're like, if they take an early lead and it just feels easy, if they fall away, if they start to get sloppy, if the momentum starts to go against them, if they fall asleep and give up a cheap try, and then all of a sudden it is a narrow game in the second half, then we might see a picture that we haven't had to see from France this year, which is them in a close game that they have to win, when they might have to dig it out. That
kind of pressure, that tangible pressure that can obviously skew the picture a little bit from what you're reading before the game, in the cold, sterile environment of before the game, looking at it, it doesn't make sense. But then when you're in the fire,
if they don't take tries, if they go to the red zone and Wales give up a penalty and they happily take a 3-pointer here, a 3-pointer here, a 3-pointer there, then give up one, then all of a sudden Wales strike before the half, and then it's 10-9 to the opposition, even though France have been the best side. We've seen that kind of thing happen before.
That has played out in this fixture before, with both sides doing it to each other, to be honest. They both have similar habits, so it could go that way. But I don't know, how do you figure this one going?
That's what I was saying. Like, on paper it is all France. The only question is, do they get put into that fire, into that position where they haven't been all year, where they're in the second half and they have to dig it out. To
be frank as well, where Wales haven't put anyone all year either.
No, indeed. And
maybe Scotland.
Where I was going with this was to say that I don't think that'll happen. I think it's a fair question to put to the French team, because they haven't actually been in that situation where they have to come back from behind and the pressure's on them, and maybe we'll see something new from them.
It's probably one that they want to answer for themselves, for their own sake as well, with the macro of 2023 World Cups as well. They want these kinds of tests.
I mean, they've just beaten Ireland and Scotland. They are Ireland at home, a very, very good Ireland team, one of the form sides in the world themselves, who did counterpunch really well.
Gave them a right game. It's always good to come out at the right end of a result in a game of that quality. It stands you in good stead.
And then to go to Murrayfield and just be merciless like they were. So far I haven't seen a glimpse of it. I haven't seen a glimpse of that French kind of laissez-faire, falling away, losing focus. It hasn't been there. They have been very focused, very well coached, determined, brilliant. That's all we've seen from them this year. That's all we have to go on. And so if they do rock up in that vein, they will win this game. I don't doubt it. So I am picking France to win this one. Perhaps win it big, because they've been so good. They haven't missed a beat so far.
To be honest, I suspect you're right. But for colour's sake, I'm going to say that Wales managed to scupper them, or that France managed to scupper themselves. But somehow that Cardiff juju might do well for them. It's kind of aligned with my Irish Grand Slam predictions that don't work out. I would like for Wales to do the job on them in Cardiff and don't leave the suspense to the final weekend. But no, I'll say that Wales do arrive to the pitch this time and actually start well for once, and France maybe don't start quite so well for once, and we'll see that game play out. To be honest, like it's France might be able to dig that one out too. I do think that France are the better side of the two, but I think there's something to this home advantage.
They've got that ace in the whole 6-2 split to bring in well against a Welsh pack that very much hasn't been doing the business. So I'm
going to say a marginal 1 point win for Wales, 1 or 2 point win for Wales, and a very head scratching showing from the French. That's what I'm going to say. It can happen. Shoes on the other foot from last year.
It's happened every year so far. So for France, they haven't been able to finish it yet, but this team does look better than any I've seen since that 2010 year. So I'm going France. He's going Wales. Who do you got? Let us know in the comments down below. We'll enjoy this one. It's going to be a class Friday night show in Cardiff.
Absolutely. But with that, we are going to move on. For Saturday brings another couple of games, and we're going to start in Rome, where Italy will be hosting Scotland in what is Traditionally, historically, they wouldn't spoon off in this comp, but to be honest, it's kind of departed from that in the last fair few seasons, with Scotland kind of joining the rest of the pack as well, as it were, and Italy have struggled in all of these matchups, including Scotland. But as it is going to be Saturday, the afternoon game, so 2:15 kickoff in the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. Luke Pearce is going to be reffing this one, with Andrew Brace and Craig Evans on the touchline, and Steve Turhige even of the RFU in as the TMO for that. It's a colourful enough history between them. In total they've played each other 33 times. Scotland have won 25, Italy 8, and none of them have drawn. They've never drawn a game, so maybe that could be on the cards, but I don't know. Their most recent encounter was obviously last year's Six Nations one, and that was won by Scotland 52-10, quite convincing there. Italy's last win against Scotland actually did come in Murrayfield, but all the way back in 2015, that one by a score of 22-19, so that's quite a while ago in Italy's reckoning, in terms of this is quite a new team that we're looking at this year, and this is going to be a Scotland that are a bit stung from last week as well, so interesting.
No question. Just as far as a bit of colour on the overall fixture, the fixture now has a trophy awarded to it, and this is going to be called the Cutita Cup, which is named after the ex-Italian captain, Massimo Cutita, who was also a Scottish scrum coach and a very popular guy. Actually passed away due to COVID about 11 months ago, and so the fixture is now rightfully going to honour him with such a great legacy in both countries. There
you go.
So yes, much respect, Massimo Cutita. A nice gesture to give the fixture a trophy named after the great man. And also just a little bit of colour as well is that the Gilbert Rugby is going to celebrate this event with a limited edition blue ball, and it's a cool looking thing. I saw a picture of it on Twitter, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing that blue ball flying this way and that.
So again, for Italy, for the Italy game,
they used to always do a different ball in Rome before it was standardized.
That's true, actually. There used to be some whinging from kickers regarding that issue. I remember from games in Rome.
Miro Pez kicked with a I think it was a uniquely rounded ball. It was like more something rounded like or something like that. But now it's more standardised, but still a cool ball in Rome, which is no bad thing.
Right.
We're going to look ahead to the fixture from the point of view of each team, starting of course with Italy. Obviously just a tough week, obviously digesting another heavy loss, and that was a really difficult, irritating game in Dublin with the 13 player scenario and how it played out, and they probably emptied themselves for no return in a way that was immensely frustrating, because they played so well in parts of that game.
They defended very well in parts of that game, kept their width and kind of shut down Ireland's lateral play for large periods, even with the 13 men, which was quite admirable. But as you say, it does amount to like a whole hell of a lot of running and a whole hell of a lot of effort for naught on the scoreboard or naught on the table as well.
Indeed, but it should give them some hope. The defense was very good. The tackling is very good.
Tackling is much better.
It's better than it's been in years.
It's a combination. We used to say that it was just the Italian tackling was so bad that we didn't even know if their defending was any good, because before their shape would break down, they'd have missed a tackle anyway, which isn't a systems error. So the coach is just looking at it like, tackle him. But this time they're actually staying connected this year, and they put in some mighty hits on big ball carriers as well. They are ferocious enough, and guys like Lamaro are dogged in the breakdown and have yielded some turnover penalties for them. It's been encouraging in that regard, and they'll fancy getting some purchase in that area against Scotland as well. They
were holding their width excellently, a bit like that Welsh defence, staying wide, and without the absence of a barnstorming carrier like Duhan as well, the Scots can get a little, the Scots tend to be a wide first kind of team.
They do, so maybe punish that naivety if they're faced with it.
They got it a few times against Ireland. They got it when a runner would just take, they'd stay connected on the drift, and a runner would take the angle and between two players, and Italy pretty consistently, the first guy would hit him and the second guy get an opportunity to jackal. And they did get a few steals. Lucchesi got a few. I believe Halafihi before he went off got one, and then Lamaro obviously getting loads of steals as he always does. And they've even got big Bram Stain to bring in if they need him in the second half. They got good back row options, and they should be confident about mixing it in that breakdown area up against the Scottish offence. And if Scotland are going to play like they did against France last week, where they're just throwing the ball around,
barbarians-esque fashion, you could maybe punish them for that.
Absolutely, win some penalties and frustrate the Scottish offence. And I think this Italian defence has shown enough that they have the potential to do that for large parts of this game.
They do. The issues do lie on the other side of the pill, though, as we've been highlighting all season, where it was the inverse last last year where we were thinking, wow, this is a fledgling offense that has some good qualities. They're just conceding 50 points every game.
Yes.
Whereas they're scoring a try every game. Whereas this year, their offensive shape is non-existent, but it's more just their speed or urgency to get on the pill.
Everything about it, like they get a steal, and it's a big roar, big hugs, and then they just forget about the next step, and that's like the key. When you get a turnover, you've got to turn it into something good.
Yeah.
And like sometimes Garbisi making a habit of 2 or 3 times a game, or at least once a game, missing touch off a touch finder. They need to play with much more focus on the ball. It's looking all too kind of Ledesma's Argentina at the moment, where it's like as much as the defence needed addressing, the offence does need to be a point of focus. And when you have the ball, they need to go downfield and launch off set pieces. They need to be quick to fold. Like so far, it's hard to analyse. Like how does this Italian offence unpick the Scottish defence is a question we might pose to ourselves. What Italian offence? There hasn't been one so far.
I haven't really seen it. There's been that one decent try in the French game off the box kick that was dropped.
Yeah, but that was just a chaotic moment where, as you say, it was a box kick that was dropped, and then Garbisi had the wherewithal to put in a beautiful kick to his mate on the wing, who got a great score. That's fine. That's a great capitalising off a chaos ball, but that is not an offence that runs off a set piece that you generate from a turnover. We want to see what they want to do on first, second, third phase.
Yes.
Like last time out, there was like a maul that they had where they put some men in the maul, went forward a few metres, did a hit up through, I think it was Brex in the midfield, then Varney ran to the ruck, looked up, and nobody had folded around the corner. They had nothing. Like there wasn't a plan beyond phase 1.
Yeah.
That has to change. Like we know Garbisi has the techers to pull out good passes.
And we know that Varney wants to be a quick little halfback, and to be honest, he's out. So Braley as well. Like they're all of a mould that's quite small and nippy and wants to kind of clear rucks. So you've got to be there for them. You've got to be folding around the corner, keen to get onto the ball. And we'd normally forgive that later in the game when that kind of disappears. When guys like Lamara have already made like a million tackles, but it's happening from the opening bell. Before they were down to the 13 last week, that was that maul set that you were alluding to in the Ireland game, and they just had no one folding, and that can't be the case. And I think it won't be, because they do normally, in a way that they've been good on the defensive end as well, but they do normally target this Scotland game as their one chance to get a win that is kind of in the mindset of the Italians as maybe their opportunity to do something. So I expect to see them a little bit more proactive with the pill this time, but with that, it's got to be proactive with purpose. You got to have a little bit of shape. You got to kind of give options to Garbisi, who's your ultimate playmaker. Get Ioane on the ball more often than he is. Every time they get him on the ball, which has been all too rare this tournament, but something positive has come of it.
And just work him in. He's a scary man. He's a scary man for any defence. Like if you're looking at a line out on the left wing, he's your blindside winger. He's involved, and you need to be running moves with him involved, really off both set pieces.
Inside balls. And he basically needs to be their Corabetti style winger. Like get him off the wing as often as you can. Get him in on inside lines.
Involved can be used as a decoy, but he occupies the minds of defenders and puts fear in defenders like no one else in this Italian team.
True.
He needs to be playing off Garbisi. He needs to be an option. He needs to open up the space for the other players in the team.
Occupy defenders like Harris, and then maybe there might be chances, space.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yes. So be a bit more positive with the pill, please. Italy is definitely the message, but not at the expense of what they've been doing on defense. They've been defending very well this tournament. And credit has to go.
Exactly, and they're conceding. Not as much, but similar to what they conceded last year. Obviously, the Ireland game is kind of an anomaly.
It is,
but it's like it's very different from last year, where last year they actually would have an equal share of possession for 25 minutes.
England,
but they just conceded
this fledgling
instantly.
England team kept them to 0 in Rome last time they were playing there, so that has to change this time.
Exactly.
They've got to score in front of the home fans.
They will end up conceding 50 points again, even though their defence is infinitely better than it was when they were conceding 50 points last year, if they don't produce on the offensive side. Because as it was with Argentina in the past year, like if you just don't attack and end up defending,
your defence is very
periods,
good, and you stuffed 19 All Black sets or All Black drives or whatever you want to call it. That's really good. You stuffed 19 attacks from them. Now that you did give them 37 to go with, so they scored off the other ones.
Those are some big numbers, but
no, they were just kicking everything as well. Italy do need to produce a bit more if they want to do it, and I do expect they will kind of arrive to that pitch of the battle with Scotland coming into town. And from Scotland's point of view as well, that's a different kettle of fish altogether, isn't it? It's just how do you settle down and dust yourselves off after another. It's a losing record now. It's a disappointing campaign already. It's rounds 4 and 5, and they've had the break, and their tournament challenge is over as it stands.
We weren't lying at the time when we said after that game against France, and even to be honest, like the writing was on the wall after that game against Wales that they let slip, that this is going to be another really, really bad, disappointing, devastating year for them, and no matter how they dress it up, it is that already.
Sure.
They haven't got much to play for this summer. It's not a marquee tour, and obviously just running out of time to get silverware ahead of like being on the impossible side of the World Cup draw coming up in 18 months' time. It gets grim for Scotland, but Mark Bennett was out in front of the media today, and he's been trying to spin it positively. He's talking about we're aiming to finish this tournament with back-to-back wins,
get the winning record back. Yeah, that's what they're scrapping for. Same as it was last year, as they're in that scrap, but it's not where they want to be, but the focus for this week is arriving to the pitch and going through their processes, putting their game together proactively, and being controlled in their ability to dispatch Italy before you look ahead to big challenges like Dublin, because that's obviously the last game of the tournament for them. But it involves arriving to the pitch to just no nonsense, and to be fair, they have been good at that in the last kind of 5 years, really, since last they lost or 5 years plus at just dispatching Italy and looking good doing it. To be honest, they've managed to manage that pretty much without exception over the last few years, and they'll be looking to do that again, because they need some confidence back, they need some momentum back after that, they need some wind back in their sails, and this is a good chance to get some tries on the board and do just that.
Absolutely it is. They need to they just as far as their squad is concerned, they are going to have to freshen it up a little bit. Sure. And I think they're going to bring in some new personnel. There is a bit of news around that. Duhan van der Merwe has just received his ban. He's gone
red carded
for the tournament last 2 weeks. Gone.
That's no good. They could have used him.
Indeed. So I think it's probably a shootout between Kyle Steyn and Rufus McLean. If they don't want to do any funky things with Blair Kinghorn and make him a winger or something. But no, I think it'll probably be one of them. And both of them, to be fair, are their incumbent Scottish international form is excellent.
True.
Steyn I think scored 4 tries in the game against a tier 2 opponent last year.
He did.
He's an awesome player. So I wouldn't fear too much about that.
No, I think their depth on the wing position is pretty good, to be honest. It's not the worst place. It is just that you're losing a talismanic British and Irish Lion for it. That's the loss, but shouldn't affect them for this game.
I was pretty down on Blair Kinghorn as a 10 option after the last game against France. I thought he came on, looked really, really poor. Didn't look like he could stick the passes under pressure that Finn Russell could stick, and it just was a very ugly look, them trying to run that desperate offence only without Finn. It just looked much worse, unsurprisingly, than it did with Finn. Even though Finn himself was struggling, but he did have a sparkling performance last week for Edinburgh against Connacht. Ripped them to shreds, was throwing passes this way and that, was taking it to the line, was throwing no look insides, outsides,
winning contacts, getting the offload away.
He played great. But Gregor Townsend perhaps shares my suspicions, because he's called up both Ross Thompson and Adam Hastings.
They're shopping around.
I'm four options at 10.
Four options. You probably want to give minutes to someone else other than Finn as well, similar to what we're looking at from Ireland as well with the Sexton things. Like, Finn is their guy, but they do need to kind of know a bit more about these guys in behind, because as much as like a great showing for Edinburgh from Kinghorn doesn't necessarily give you confidence that if Finn takes a knock in the first 10 minutes against Ireland, that he's going to be able to
there's kind of the element of like, he's been in the squad as a 10, it didn't go great against France, but if it's going to go great at all, you're going to see it probably against Italy.
Sure.
So throwing him in there would probably be no harm, with a mind to changing things if things go wrong. But they've also got interesting quandaries in the pack. I think coming back into the squad is Johnny Gray this week.
That's good for them, because Gilchrist hasn't quite been doing the business, and the locks are just interesting, because like a lot of good Scottish, we were watching some club footy, and like for Sarries you have Tim Swinson putting his hand up, putting a mighty showing in against Leicester last weekend, and you're like, Scotland do have quite a lot of good locks, but the balance hasn't quite been right in that type 5.
Gilchrist in particular has been not good so far this tournament, and their whole pack has been not good. Johnny Gray, when he was in, was not good. He wasn't good, and even in the opening week against England, I didn't think he was great. And Glenn Young came in as well. He's an uncapped potential lock option, but they do need to freshen things up front. You could even stick a guy like Bayless in as a wild card, but like really guys like Hamish Watson need to show their form. Their best forward has been Pierre Schoeman, who has been phenomenal.
He's been great, to be honest. That scrummaging pedigree that they've been bringing, it was great against France, even in that defeat. Their scrum looked good, to be honest, at parts, and got some stuff off.
I'd love to see Ewan Ashman in the team as well. I think McAnally's been a letdown.
And another area where they have surprising depth is in hooker, and they have a few decent options. I think you will see some rotation for it being the Italy game, but what's more important is that they get their own game back, because the tail end of last week against France was just a bit wild, where they kind of lost the run of themselves and started running things, playing a very barbarian looking game against a very organised defence, and it got very ugly very fast. And to be honest, the tail end of the South African game, where they were chasing it as well, like back in autumn, was a similar picture of just getting all kinds of loose and not sticking to the process. Whereas here, they should be backing their defence, which has been good even against tier 2 or tier 1 opponents and top level opponents in this tournament already. Back their defence to hold this very limited Italian offence to close to 0, if not 0, and then from there, kick well, try and control territory, try and use the ball as proactively as you can, and the tries will come. Stay patient, launch off set piece like you do. That's what they're going to aim for.
Yeah, absolutely. Using the kicking game is going to be huge. I think the forward pack has been beaten up now, and just the whole team has been beaten up now twice at home in the last 6 months or so. Obviously, you look at the French game, you look at the South Africa game, just brutally demoralised in those 2 games. The forward pack needs to get back to its roots. This is a tough Italian pack. They've been physical, they've been excellent this year, they've got some good players, but if Scotland want to be serious about coming back and being one of the big boys and maintaining sort of their cred as one of the great top 5 teams, they're going to have to put this Italian pack to bed, and I think it's a good challenge for them. I think this is a tougher Italian challenge up front than we've had in quite a while, with guys like Lucchesi and guys like Lamaro. But winning that battle, Hamish Watson, like these guys, Johnny Gray, these guys who are allegedly great players, they need to show up, they need to be brutal, they need to get after them, they need to explode in the offensive breakdown, give them nothing, and if they can win that battle, it will be an easy game for them. Yeah,
I would agree with that. It's like contacts first, but also just be mature about it. Don't go wild. For sure, yeah. Don't go gunslinging from the opening bell. Even if it works, it's just not proactive really. They want to see. So run some patterns. If it's with a new 10 in there, try and run your shapes, try and a few nice set
get your wingers involved.
Yeah, and a few of those nice Gregor Townsend strike moves off either scrum or line out in the middle third or around there.
That's been how they've scored against a lot of tier 2 teams. They've opened them up off those Townsend set piece moves. They've worked really well against tier 2 opposition.
They're really well designed. When they stick the passes and run the lines correctly, they're really well designed, and you'll find it tough to see any defence coping with them some of the time when they dial it in. It's just a matter of executing when the pressure's on, but I don't suspect they should be in for too much pressure here, apart from what they bring with them.
I do agree with you. I'm not suggesting go bashing into them from your own half. You do kick, you do use Hog's boot, you do use the boot of whoever's a 10.
These are advantageous, and some of the loose kicks that Garbisi does put in those little territorial battles will be to the huge benefit of the Scottish pack and then Scotland's offence.
But the other, like for me, the challenge for that pack is like, can they maul effectively against Italy? They need to be able to do that. They need to be able to maul effectively. They need to be able to carry effectively. They need to win collisions, get offloads going, get a bit of confidence in them, and I do think that that's a fair challenge. I would be very curious to see how that forward battle plays out, because the Italian pack is pretty tough, but the Scottish pack, if it wants to be truly competitive, needs to shut them down.
And with an eye towards what Bennett's talking about in terms of the eyeballing Dublin as the big game, they need to get some momentum and get some ducks in a row before they do that, and this is a perfect hit out to do that. It's the same way all of these teams use the Italy game as well. Recover a bit of momentum, but also find out a few things about your shape, try and run a few of these patterns that you're working on.
Maybe Chris Harris, who went off injured the last day, I know he's in the squad, but Bennett was in front of media, maybe you take him out and just see, does the defence work as well without Harris, or is it completely back to being terrible without him? And that's a fair thing to learn, but also they should be confident of stopping the Italian offence.
To be honest, they want to be confident of their ability to rotate some key men in and give good minutes to fringe players while not affecting the kind of consistency of their play or just the style of their play. They want to have a uniform enough way of playing the game even when some of those fringe guys are in, and then you're right, they want to just win that forward battle outright. That's the big challenge, just win that outright, and then the scores will come. Their fitness is in a better place, their offense is a better place, they're a better team than Italy, and they do know that. So yes, just stay calm within it and trust your processes, and the scores should and will come, I would imagine, if you're Scotland.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. So yes, with all that said, how do you think it's going to go?
I think Scotland with a reasonably big win. I think a brief period of some kind of inaccurate play and maybe a bit of frustration here or there, maybe some a patch of play that's a bit stop-start and a bit low scoring. If Italy's dogged defence does contribute that to the game, that'll be good for them, but no, I think Scotland will manage to win this one pretty comfortably. I hope Italy get a try this time out. Obviously Scotland don't hope that, and I'm not convinced convinced that they will.
No,
but
it comes
my
from
hope
maybe
for the
a
game,
jackal steal of their own if Scotland try
Or
and
a
run it
pick.
out,
Yeah,
and
no,
then kick
wild
it into
pick.
the corner, and
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
a good maul if they can execute from there. But to be honest, that's where I was going with this, is that matchup of this non-existent Italian offence versus a very good Scottish defence that's excellent at jackling, especially when the intensity is that bit down.
Yeah.
Could be
and
just
if it's telegraphed,
endlessly-
if they're just coming one
Yeah, yeah.
around the corner into a Scottish jackler, it could be a long old day for the Italian offence. And I think Scotland are good value for a win here. And to be honest, I have confidence that they've been good at putting Italy to the sword in the last few years. So I suspect this will be no different as well. And I think Italy will be a bit beleaguered after three pumpings and obviously the 13 men, then 12 men of last week. I think it'll be a bit fatiguing, and I think Scotland will be able to make that tell.
Yeah, in and around 40 something points to maybe one try or maybe not.
Yeah, something like that. If Scotland are good, they'll get over the 50. If they're not, they won't. But that's it.
We shall see. Let us know how you think it's going to go down in the comments below. But with that, we are going to move on to the main show on Saturday. Yes, and it is a mighty one indeed, rounding out the weekend in Twickenham, Saturday at 4:45 GMT, England playing host to Ireland in essentially the title eliminator, I guess, before the final round. This one's going to be taken by Matthew Reynal, Mike Adamson can't do too much damage as the AOR, and Pierre Brousset as the other AOR, and Marius Jonker in the TMO box. This is going to be a huge game between two classic rivals who have been going at it since the 19th century, as you'll say. But it's been it's a phenomenal game, and the stakes couldn't be higher between two class teams. This is perhaps the highlight of the whole weekend, I would think.
I would think so. It's always delivers this one, and just for sheer emotional stakes and history, and then quality of rugby as well. This is kind of one of those matchups that is what epitomises what the Six Nations is all about. As you say, England and Ireland have been playing in rugby union internationals against each other since 1875. The first game being won by England in the Oval in London by a score of 2-0 from way back when in the old scoring system. Since then, the two teams have played a total of 138 test matches, with England winning 80, Ireland 50, and 8 of them resulting in a draw. So quite even-numbered matchups there in that regard.
Yeah, comfortable win for England overall.
Overall, they have held the record for sure. Apart from their annual Six Nations match as well, the teams have also met in 3 World Cup warm-up matches prior to the 2011, 2015 and 2019 World Cups, all of which have been won by England. There was also one-off match in April 1988 to celebrate the millennium of the city of Dublin, and that was where the kind of perpetual trophy that exists for this matchup arose. It's the Millennium Trophy that's up for grabs when these two clash. It's currently held
not
by
the millennium that people might think, but no, a different millennium entirely.
Indeed, Dublin's millennium. It's currently held by Ireland, I should say, who did triumph last year in the Aviva Stadium in Dublin at 32-18. That was on the final day of the tournament last year.
That was Ireland righting a wrong that Eddie Jones had the Indian sign over Ireland for a long time after 2018, constantly beating them in 2019 twice, in 2020 twice. And in 2021 Ireland finally managed to right the course under Andy Farrell for the first time. But as we said, this is the game between the only two teams not named France who could yet win the competition, both with 2-1 records so far. The loser of this game going back to an even record, out of contention, while the winner has a chance to bring it to the last weekend with a chance to win the tournament.
That's exactly it. The last 2-1 sides left in the comp going head to head. So there's both of them effectively playing for their tournament campaign lives. So that should add that extra little bit of spark, as if you don't need it, because even when these two sides are out of contention, this matchup tends to be a fiery and feisty one as well, with neither side willing to back down or give an inch. We are going to look at the preview from both sides' point of view. We're going to look at the winning conditions for each of these sides, and we're going to start with the hosts, which is England this time. It is in Twickenham, and the home of rugby, as they'd say. But another big test for this relatively young England side, relatively new pack. Obviously brand new 10 that they're very excited about, who has really risen to some of these challenges so far, but it is another test for him, for Marcus Smith. Will they have a very cogent, strong plan? Because that has been a hallmark of Eddie Jones' teams against Ireland, is have a good first quarter plan of action to try and unpick what is a very good Ireland team that'll be rolling into town.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's been interesting to hear all the criticism of England over the past couple of weeks and their offence. If you watch that game back, it wasn't too far away.
No.
They were struggling at times for options, but you could see signs of what it can be. You could see the width that they were trying to create, the speed they were trying to put on the ball.
The willingness of their forwards to play interplay and to get their hands free a bit and try and be more proactive in that area.
It's just a question of putting those options together a little more frequently, and then who knows what it could become. Joe Marler, just as far as news from the camp, Joe Marler was talking in the week about an added edge to England training, saying he was afraid to make jokes. I think he was saying he was punched a few times. They're doing their
flog the boys routine,
intense Ireland prep, as they put it, and they are saying that they're aware that Ireland are very good and there's been a different edge to camp, and this is a huge game for them. And so they're hoping to deliver what they have done against Ireland in years gone by, which is their most complete performance in the competition.
Yeah, well,
that's what they're hoping to
kind of the criticism is born of one thing in terms of the media just having a bit too much time on their hands during the gap week as well, and England media tending to be a bit more of a vicious circle of vultures than most, so there's always a bit of that knives out aspect, but they definitely have a big performance in them, and you can see that it's coming and that they are improving week on week.
There's too much quality in the side.
And there's 2 big games left. There's this one obviously, and then there's Paris the week after, so their heads are very much screwed on and focused on that, and as you say, it's still within their hands. Them and France are the only 2 who can say that it's still within their hands. Ireland need help from either Wales or England themselves to get the tournament win, whereas England, with wins this week and next, can take it all. So and for all that there's criticism about the young team and that the offense hasn't quite fired, they've still put themselves in a great position with the final 2 weeks to come. So they should be gleaning confidence from that.
Yeah, no question. They have limited their squad down to 26 players, so we have a fair idea of what they're going to be going with on the game itself, obviously notwithstanding 1 or 2 things. Interestingly,
Cowan-Dickey, I believe, was out.
Cowan-Dickey's out injured, yes, that's a blow to them, obviously, and you'd imagine Jamie George will start. Blamire will be covering him. They'll likely be sticking to more or less the same system they've had. Ewells will probably lock down with Itoje and Laws at 6. Then you have an interesting discussion in the back row. Underhill was brought in, but then was deemed not to be match ready, and so was brought back out again. Don Brandt has had COVID, but they're saying disruptive. That he might play. Obviously, Sam Simmons is a fairly straightforward swap if he doesn't. But they have got other guys who are interesting on the fringes. It may be interesting. Alfie Barbieri, who had been in such good form for Wasps, might feature if there is no Don Brandt. He might come in on the bench, or Curry, who went off the last day with a head knock. If he's not right, you could see Barbieri come into the game, either from the bench or from a starting position. That would be interesting to see. But I think the bones of the team will be quite similar. They're talking up their young 9, 10, 15 axis of it looks as though Randall has now unseated Ben Youngs, and Ben Youngs is going to come in off the bench as he did against Wales with Marcus Smith, and then that centre partnership between, there was rumours that Daly was going to be dropped out of the squad. He played quite well against Wales. He's
played quite well against Leicester at the weekend for Sarries too, so he's in decent form, but
he's attributably hurt by the fact that he's just not that quick. So he's not when you get him 1-on-1 with Gary Ringrose in an offensive set, maybe Marchant has a better chance than Daly. But I imagine he'll be there.
Although they do value, they have a lot of good boots, but Daly's is a serious cannon of a left boot that is useful for things like exit play and stuff, which is always an important factor in these Ireland matchups too. So it remains to be seen what they go with there. Obviously, the big news of Manu Tuilagi not being there, that does affect them, because there was that damning stat during that Eddie Jones era that it was Eddie Jones's era were dominant over Ireland, but the with Manu versus without Manu stat in
That's the biggest one.
So that balance in the midfield is something they haven't quite managed to nail down. And that's partly where this criticism of their offence comes, is just that traditionally England do have a hard-nosed, hard-running kind of centre in there, and more recently that has been Tuilagi, who has kind of dominated that position and made it his own, and in his absence they become a little bit more lateral, and their system kind of shifts and changes, and then they're a little bit less penetrative.
And it was interesting actually, just to throw another quote at you, because Noel was talking in front of the media, and he had some interesting things to say about the attack, and he was saying, he admitted that the attack was a work in progress, but he said that the what they're looking at this week is adopting a mindset of being brave. And so here is his quote, because I was thinking that this is such a kick heavy offense and that's worked against Ireland, and it still maybe this could all be mind games, but he's saying, he says, and I quote, a lot of it's about being brave. There have been times in the past with England, and we've all seen it, when we've had chances to go, maybe we've dropped to a kick instead. And he's saying the game
certainly
changes.
Week 1 against Scotland, they were guilty of that a lot. Yeah.
Indeed, but even just like when you have 2 or 3 on the outside, but the backfield opens up, their instinct tends to be to drop to a kick. But he's saying that you have to give guys like Randall and Marcus a chance to play, use those opportunities to try and stretch defences and keep the ball in hand and go through more phases and trust their offence to open up the defence. It was interesting to hear from him, and I think from an offensive point of view, it's obviously been the major talking point in the off week, but I think that their attack matches up okay against the Irish defence, looking even at what they did against Wales. Wales being such a well-spread team that was kind of begging to have a hard run Tuilagi come at them. Ireland's defence is toughest on the inside, and if anything is a little narrow, and to be honest, quite a lot narrow.
Yeah, well, there were times France have consistently caught them off set piece by going to one side followed by the other side, and then you'll find that all the front rowers are defending in a row.
Yeah, on the wing, exactly. Everything's disoriented. If you can tie up Henshaw and Josh and Ringrose in one side of the corner, or Aki if it's Aki, then all of a sudden you flash it to the other side, you can get some favourable matchups. And England have been going wide first. Like Ireland at times against Italy were caught narrow when they had a 2-man advantage. It was extraordinary, and Italy's offence wasn't bringing much, but you just look up and be like, geez, they have an overlap. How? Yeah. And it's because Ireland are trying to bring this pressure defence on the inside, and they are kind of a defence that's built to try and stop what Tuilagi's bringing in some ways and be that physical entity. But England are not playing that way. They're holding their depth. They're flashing it to the wings. They're really trusting guys
good
like
passers as well as good kickers. Really good passers in the back line predominantly. So they should be confident and, as Noel says, brave enough to try and pull the trigger when they see that it's on there. Because again, speed wise, you're deciding daily or whatever. But Ireland aren't the quickest backliner in the world either. Nope. So they should be able.
And they look slow on the turn.
They do.
Look slow. They look slow when teams get outside them.
You don't have to turn them by kicking all the time. Although they've had good purchase with that attacking kicks in behind to turn the back 3 too. But being brave on the offensive side and just a few more reps, a few more minutes, trusting like Marcus Smith that they don't quite know what they have. They kind of do suspect what they have there as a generational 10 potentially, but a few more minutes and a few more reps, and he is a different style of player to what they've been used to having at 10 for a while, so that's kind of where the growing pains come from. But
he does have a good understanding of defence, and he does read defences very well. He just needs to get in sync with the men around him. That's been the biggest problem so far, is just communication and being in sync with his runners, because he does see what defences are leaving him, and there are a couple of times where he just goes without bringing someone with him, and then the
sometimes, to be fair, as we highlighted the other day, Malins has been good at telegraphing or at reading what he's up to and trying to follow with him, and if Noel can do the same, and just it's not just Marcus but the few guys playing around him being a bit more attuned to like a little twitch of the shoulder that tells you he's about to peel blind or something and following him. We see that with Dombrandt for club footy with Quins, because that's just the way the offence works, but they'll just need to kind of embrace that a bit more in England colours in advance of this week and then the week after, to try and get purchase against these top level teams that they're going to be playing in crunch matches. They want to be able to produce really good moments of offensive footy and unpick those defences eventually.
And then the other thing from an offensive point of view is that it has been a little 1970s in terms of just once or twice, especially on the multi-phase, there hasn't been a sense that there's a proper pod and a proper screen option, and it was very 10, 12, 13 in terms of the way it lined up, and that obviously isn't going to fly against a good Irish defence. You do need someone cutting that hard line, be it Dombrandt or Simmons or whoever's in there. Itoji even can cut that line. You do need to give Smith that space to try and access the deep outside channels and just make Ireland respect you on the inside. They tend to do that anyway, and the space might be there on the outside, and that's on the guys in the pitch to read it, but you do need that inside option to sit down the Irish defence. And I wouldn't hate seeing guys coming off the shoulder of Smith on his inside, like Noel running a line off him on the inside, just to check the Irish defence, keep them guessing, 1 or 2 setup plays before they really try and stretch them and get after Ringrose. And that's where you would want to see, it's kind of a horses for courses thing of who you put where you trust your inside runners, because you do need someone being the Tuilagi in the team, and Dombrandt's a natural choice, but you also need a ball playing forward out there to help your wingers, and I think maybe a Jamie George type or someone on the edge to sort of be a link man on the outside of Gary Ringrose's shoulder and try and find the winger out there is definitely something that they've been looking at already. Their forward pods, they've often had pods of 3 on the wing, which is pretty extreme, but that is probably what they're going to be trying to bring to the Irish defence. And just as you said at the start, if you can bring it from one wing to the other wing, Ireland can get disconnected. If you can do that in two phases, it does tend to rattle Ireland more than a forward hit-up does, because Ireland, that kind of settles them into the rhythm of defending a little more, and they can bring pressure then and hopefully force an error. But if you're stretching them from one side of the pitch to the other, then all of a sudden they're having to move, they look a little slower, they're a little slower off the line, and that's where guys like Marcus Smith can unpick them.
Absolutely. And then more proactively as well is where they're going to look to get after them at defensive time, because they actually have a lot of tape on how to punish Ireland and how to use a big meaty pack to do just that in the contact area. And that, like France did it, showed how to do it, but Eddie Jones's England have, with dynamism and power, got over the gain line with the ball, but also just smashed and upset the rhythm of the Irish offence to the point where they're kicking banal kicks towards Freddie Stewart, who gobbles them up as well. It's got to be a big performance from the whole 8, and then beyond that as well, the pack men, or the men on the bench, to come in and contribute physically, because they have a lot of really powerful forwards out there, and as much as they've been excited about getting involved in this new look offence, the nuts and bolts of it are things like, Maro Itoje's breakdown and maul work that is spoiling that kind of thing from a defensive point of view, making Ireland's rhythmical offence just come unstuck, and then be proactive in the breakdown enough that you can kind of, somehow when the crowd gets involved in Twickenham like that, you can kind of make the Irish challenge shrink if you can get on top in that collision area.
No question. The collision area is interesting. It is a unique challenge. This is a different Irish offence even than the one that beat them last year, Hollow in Dublin. It's more evolved than that. It's all sort of run when Sexton's there, which we think he will be this week. It's running so seamlessly at the moment. We haven't really seen it come unstuck while Sexton's on the pitch. He's got a great read on the game. They're always going to start off with that pot of forwards, but what they're doing now that they weren't doing when England were smashing them back is adding just the layers of options and playing off one another in a way that wasn't happening before. And we haven't seen Sexton come unstuck yet, but I suspect the idea of targeting him and trying to hit him is probably not the best way. The best way is to try and get him to go into contact himself by kind of
depriving the options. It means staying connected outside of him such that he doesn't see a pass.
Yeah, exactly. With taking his first two good options away from him, his dump off short ball, just shutting that down, and then his secondary pass out the back, bringing pressure and shutting that down, and that might force him to tuck and go. And if you can even get him, it might look like a positive play where he comes in, but it's kind of a matador move where he can go down the middle, get stopped, and then all of a sudden the rhythm of the Irish offence isn't what it was. They're going to have to go to a forward hit up, and that's where your Itoje or Ewell's smash comes into play. All of a sudden they're backwards, and by the time Sexton's back, all we can kind of do is kick the ball. The other area you were talking about, Itoje as well, like the job he did on the Welsh line out last time, he's not going to get away, I don't think, with encroaching to that extent.
No, the Ireland line out is very good, but pressure it. They love
to launch off line out. Both of these teams so much love to launch.
The last time Ireland were in Twickenham facing them, actually Itoje himself did an absolute number on James Ryan, so he did, and really made it tough and difficult for Ireland to launch off that particular set piece, which is their go-to. I think it's something like 60 plus, and close to 70% of Ireland's scores over the professional era come from line-outs. It's a huge focus for both teams, so that is obviously just a tantalising matchup. And then similarly, scrum time, you're going to have to deal with some dynamic props in the Ireland camp. Obviously no Porter, but some very good scrummaging assets there, and you want to try and make it as combative as you can. They also kind of want to right the wrongs of last week at that particular set piece and be a bit more solid on their own pill as well, from an England point of view. But the set piece battle will be very, very close to decisive in this one, to be honest, because a lot of the time it does come back down to those basics.
It certainly will be if someone gets the edge. Like it might be the case that both sides are secure in their own ball. I think that's probably most likely. But if someone gets an edge, it will be massive. And if the most likely outcome there is Itoje to get on top of the Irish line out, which, because he's so good at it.
We've seen him do it before.
No question. In terms of how the game plays out, like England, we talked about their offence. We know they should be confident. I still think from the middle third, in the way a lot of these sequences go, they'll have their plans to launch off lineouts. They will have one or two.
They'll have a cut here and there.
Yeah, they'll have one or two like little sequences that Eddie Jones designs that they want to be perfect, that hopefully will yield a try for them. But I think mostly you're going to be looking at them working the pendulum, kicking the ball deep, generating lineouts and then trying to attack in the red zone. And hence the intrigue of this game, where it'll most likely play out, is when they're on the defensive side, and Ireland have pretty religiously been first port of call, trying to run the ball from just about everywhere inside their own kind of 60-metre range. They've been trying to work that offense. Sexton's been standing deep, running off his pod. He has wide options, he has short options, and they've pretty much gone through the phases very rhythmically and very well. And I think one of the things that England did so well against Wales last week time out was punish them for playing rugby in their own half. And that's going to be
isolate the runners, get over the ball,
create
the penalty.
And when Ireland are running all these support lines, if they can get a good tackle in, a good read in,
just takes one, and then the crowd are in, and then you're in, and then the ball's turned over.
They should all be dialed into having a poach first and foremost. Have a poach. Ireland are a little lax at the moment on their breakdown work,
and you saw with France, like, even if the poach doesn't come good, it still upsets the rhythm, because like that, what they did in week 1, Ireland was managed to create like 2-second rucks and 1.5-second rucks for Gibson Park, and it was gone before it was even there, and there was no contest, and there was no chance for the Welsh defenders. Whereas France,
and that was all November as well.
Whereas France, with just physicality in the contact, which is something you'd associate with English forwards and English play in general as well, and then just combative instincts at the breakdown, make it a mess, get involved in there, and just make sure that it's nothing clean coming out to the Irish halfback. And then that's the step one towards just upsetting the rhythm, such that you create that doubt in Irish heads that forces the box kicking game to come back out, and then suddenly you're a bit more comfortable there. Freddie Stewart's great at diffusing those bombs, and you're kind of forcing Ireland to be a bit more reactive than proactive, and away from home that could be enough. If
the Irish offense isn't able to function from the midfield, they're going to be a problem, and that comes from the breakdown pressure. So it's a big day for the likes of Itoje, Curry, Dombrandt, Barbieri, if he's out there, that's his specialty as well.
George, if he wants to have a cut.
Yeah, he's more a Cowan-Dickie role. There is no Cowan-Dickie this week, but nevertheless, that's going to be an area that England are definitely going to have to focus on.
Sure, for sure. And then on the flip side, from the green lens, Ireland have a lot to do, because as much as in some people's eyes they're the more form side coming into this one and whatever, it's still Twickenham, and it's very, very tough to not make England favourites in Twickenham from an Irish point of view. This is their second, from the macro lens, it's their second of their big 5 away tests in this calendar year, and none of them come easy. They failed test 1, but only just gave a right good game in France, but did just fall short in Paris, and now they have London and Twickenham to try and deal with, and it's a tough old ask.
It's a tough old ask. You said at the beginning of the year they could easily go 0-5 without playing badly, and that is very much the equation here. A lot of people are giving them a good chance. Some of the bookies have them favourites. Wins in Twickenham are few and far between.
Wins in Twickenham. It's tough to make anyone but England favourites in Twickenham when 2 rugby teams take the field there. But
very tough indeed. Ian Henderson, from a squad point of view, is back in the squad. As you pointed out, Porter gone, unfortunately, out for the tournament. So Jeremy Lockman comes in. He's unlikely to feature. You're probably looking at Cian Healy at loose head, with Kilcoyne coming in behind him, and then Ty Furlong and Beelum on the other side.
Likely,
with Sheehan and Herring then in the middle. That all-star front row, unfortunately, has gone by the wayside a little bit.
2 out of 3 gone down, but that is to be expected when you're running a lot through your forwards and stuff, and it is a test of the depth in behind.
You guys will have the teams by the time that this video comes out, so I won't belabour the point, but it will be interesting to see how they work the options they have at lock, whether they go with Henderson, Ryan, and how they fit Ty Byrne into that equation. Do they drop one of them? Does Byrne come in at 6 in place of Doris maybe? And then you've got Josh.
I do like Doris at the fulcrum of those pendulums. He is a good pivot man in that pod, but
he's not had a great, he's been okay, but he's not had a great Six Nations. Doris, his hands are kind of letting him down sometimes. He's had a few cold drops in big moments.
Well, they do use him as a first receiver a lot of the time though, so I don't know what their option is. The question mark around Byrne is at scrum time, to be honest, and they didn't see anything from the other locks in behind last week because we didn't have contested scrums, but the France game was a concern when you have the ballast like that, and England present a similar challenge in terms of just the engine room and the heft in there. So it'll be interesting to see what they go with, but it's pretty settled by and large, and they do have great options in the back row to rotate in, and there's kind of a back row by committee aspect to it as well.
I feel like Josh and Conan are dead certs.
I think so,
jerseys, and the locks,
and O'Mahony probably on the bench as well. So lots of good experience. A bit of a dilemma at 12 as well. Henshaw hadn't really hit the ground running coming back from injury, whereas Aki looks very good.
I'd be surprised if they didn't go Aki.
I think Ringrose is probably safe, given that Hume actually did struggle a bit, despite some good club form this year. He did struggle a bit in the Italy game, I should say. But yeah, so they've got kind of quite a settled team. We kind of know what to expect from Ireland. It's just a matter of whether we see them arrive to the pitch in Twickenham or not.
Yeah, that's it. The back three as well is interesting. I'm curious to see who they go for with Hugo Keenan. There's so many good wings in form.
They do.
Go Noah Hansen, Balakoon, Conway.
Yeah, all Larmer was going well in club footy as well.
Unfortunately been ruled out.
He's injured. Managed to pick up a knock, but there's good options out there. I think Hugo Keenan we will obviously see. I suspect we will see Lowe as well, if for no other reason than the big left boot against that English kicking game that they know will be quite formidable. It's quite an asset, and I don't think they'll ignore it. But yeah, the Irish team does have quite a lot of quality to delve from, a good amount of depth, and as we've been highlighting, a very sophisticated offensive system now that involves the ball playing skills of all of their forwards, which is a point of difference and always has been. Kind of gets these proactive players, guys like Tadhg Furlong, in at the first receiver pivot point, granting a lot more space and time for Sexton, who's out the back, and then normally another pod behind, and just it's a matter of choosing the right options and squaring the shoulders. They were a little lateral at times in the Italy game. They were also kind of sometimes found wanting running off Joey Carberry in France a little bit. They got the timing of those runs a bit wrong.
It was all not quite right without Sexton, unfortunately. But Sexton, for what it's worth, reads the game so well these days.
True.
Like it's the little micro reads that he gets on a defense, the set before he gets the ball, where he just knows whether or not to go outside a little bit, whether he knows that the option is for the first pod to keep the ball, try and pressure them that way, or if he does get the ball, am I running a little wide here and then square? Am I trying to find the edge? Are the defence a little narrow, or are they a little stretched? In which case I'm straightening and finding my short runner to kind of open them up a little, not open them up entirely, but just stretch them a little more, pressure them. He just, his option taking, and he runs the lines to suit the options that he reads the play before the phase starts, if that makes sense. Like his read on that is so perfect these days. That's what Ireland are going to have to bring, and that's what you want to see them bring. This Irish team has been all about going through brilliant, quick, dynamic phases with all kinds of
multi-phases. Like they're doing it quickly, clearing rucks in 2 and 3 seconds, but going through 10 to 15 phases before breaking you down, which is like a very bewildering array of offense to have to deal with from a defensive point. And that is the kind of, they want to try and overload English defenders with those options, is exactly what they want to do. Present Tadhg Furlong the ball, go forward ball from quick things, and have options either side, because you have to respect the heft of that carry.
And then all of a sudden English defenders are kind of at best off balance and one-on-one against a guy like Jack Conan, and then if he does win that contact, he does have an option to give it to a Tadhg Byrne or something along those lines. And we've seen the Irish offence work in that way to rumble over the gain line, and Gibson Park drives a great tempo. Sexton's calling great plays, picking great options. The guys are picking sharp lines, and it does look irresistible. And we haven't yet seen that unstuck with Sexton at the helm at quarterback.
That's true. Obviously,
that's really they're
hanging their hope on it. Yeah, going to look to try and run at England in Twickenham, which is going to be a new look. Try and not present a slow, laboured box kicking territory kind of struggle, which they have done the last few times in Twickenham to limited success. Try and back the barnstorming offense. Correct to point out that offensive breakdown has to be managed. There are English monsters who will be targeting it, and France got some good purchase there by just winning contacts and then stymieing it. You want to see Gibson Park getting front foot ball, getting clean ball to be able to whip around. So a lot of that is on the accuracy of the clean out, because sometimes they're running these optimistic lines and it just involves a little bit of extra work to kind of backpedal and get into a ruck and resource it. But the first man there does need to stick his clean out pretty much all the time when you're doing it that way, when you're going through as many phases as Ireland like to. So that is a priority, would be kind of tidying up that offensive breakdown, because it has been a little loose both in the Italy game and in the France game.
And not just the offense breakdown, like the what you're talking about as well. Like it's a fabulous thing to watch Ireland play with such verve and such vigour and such brilliance on the offensive ball, moving it from everywhere. It does require like a lot of accuracy, like almost more than Joe Schmidt was so intent from an accuracy point of view on not making mistakes. But actually in these big games, making mistakes can be criminal. The difference between a pass from Gibson Park that goes over Furlong's left ear, or a tip-on pass that's dropped, or just a quality of a carry, a mistimed run off someone, that can be the difference between getting smashed by Tom Curry or actually breaking through the line and getting an offload away. Like the accuracy of everything that Ireland are doing, they've been brilliant, really brilliant now in the last 6 months to a year nearly. They've been near enough flawless. But they're coming into this game probably on as little momentum as they've had in that time, and just given the sort of damp squib nature of that Italy game and the 13 men, that was the only headline from it, and they can't even have felt good about what happened after that.
They all looked a little weird on the pitch about it. It didn't feel right, and it kind of washed over the team, and it just kind of, the game then passed everyone by without too many learnings to take from it.
Exactly. So it'll be a good strength of, first of all, just how high the ceiling is for this offense in terms of operating away from home against a really good physical English defense, and secondly, the mental resilience of this team and these players to try and execute really high level physical, skillful, quick rugby
in a cauldron like that.
In a cauldron like that is exactly right. Yeah, that is a real test. I think it's down to the quality more than even, I think I would trust Sexton to read and execute really well. But this whole offense falls apart without the brilliant dynamism of the loose forwards and tight forwards as well. Yeah. Can they deliver that? No Andrew Porter, Cian Healy in. That's the big question for me.
It is. No, it's a massive question, and it starts with like fundamental things like set piece, which is O'Connell's been hammering that in the press conference as well. They want to be more accurate than they have been on their own line out pill, want to be a bit more proactive on the scrummaging side as well, and just be secure on their own ball and cause a bit of discomfort on the English ball, particularly at line out time as well. That's going to be a fiercely competitive area and one of the focal points for Ireland, because they do love launching off that particular set piece. And sure, in the game last year in against England, one of the decisive blows was struck from just a strike play directly off line out. That was a really clever design at the back of the line out to put Keith Earls through a bit of space, and those kinds of tries are real ins for Ireland, particularly away from home. If you can grab good design, trust your set piece, run a nice design play and grab a very cheap score. That's a key part of winning away from home, is being able to just execute like that and grab 5 or 7 very quickly.
One of the last times Ireland won in Twickenham, they had a couple of set piece scores off line out. So you look at 2018, CJ Standard through the middle. You look at 2010, Tommy Bowe.
They normally try to keep something in their locker for this exact fixture. So I'm excited to see what that is, because O'Connell offers a lot of good cerebral thinking. And then you have Itoje on the other side. Obviously Itoje watch is a big problem for that. If you want to secure your own set piece, you got to deal with the Itoje factor that England are bringing, so that could be a massive matchup. And then similarly then on the defence, it's a bit of a task. You have a young England side that's going to be quite a different look from all the tape that they've had on England thus far. New young 10, you want to pressure him, probably trusting Josh van der Fleer within the system to probably lead that offensive blitz on the inside, but then the outside is where you want to shut it down.
Do you hold the same shape that you've been holding on the defence? Do you trust it? It for me is still the biggest question mark in this Irish team, is just the not the integrity of the defensive capabilities of the individuals involved, but the system that is very, very narrow and often isolates their wingers, who pretty much to a man are not like great defenders.
Yeah, and there isn't a great defender as we've highlighted them, and we're acutely aware of. Like, they're all quick wingers and they're all very dangerous in open space, but they're not the quickest in world rugby. Like, certainly if they're playing the Springboks, which they are in the World Cup, like the wingers are quicker than our wingers. So if we have a system that isolates wingers 1v1, not a great matchup, and England is similar in that regard.
Exactly. England will be looking to get to that edge. They have their explosive forward pods out there. I'm curious to see whether Ireland adjust and whether they play with a bit more width, and they focus a little more on keeping width and trusting their inside defence to function without that. Like without that necessarily bunching of the area around the ruck, just trusting them one-on-one to stick tackles and contain England like Wales did.
I don't know if that's what we'll see. I think they will probably stick to a similar system, if for no other reason than I think the reverse drift and the kind of thing doesn't work well in the psyche, and has led to some of our worst defensive showings over the last few decades, in terms of it is more connected, but we tend to not be proactive then on defense in any capacity, and just soak a lot of meters on the edge for no good reason. Whereas at least when you're proactive, it is a gung-ho kind of all or nothing, similar to what the Springboks do in terms of the shoot. You're back in the read and the stick ability of Gary Ringrose, but then also outside him having Lowe or whoever on the wing follow him up and make good kind of ball and all tackles to shut down that outside proactively.
And I do like the idea of bringing line speed.
They do. It dials in an aggressive mindset to defending that. Yeah, sure, sometimes you get unpicked if you do get it wrong, but by and large it means that you are bringing speed off the line, trying to engage them in the contact on your own terms.
Yeah, and Josh van der Fleer against Smith, I don't know how awful we'll see it. Obviously, it's hard to stay connected entirely from a defensive point of view when you've got a guy like Smith who roams either side of the ruck. Like, Josh isn't going to be on him all the time, but if they can set him on Smith and kind of force him to give the ball away quickly and just not be comfortable holding the ball for large periods. Like, Smith is definitely one who likes to hold the ball for a second, and he's probably done a little too much in this tournament where he's not coming onto the ball with enough pace and he's kind of stopping and assessing and then trying to move off a guy. Josh is probably a defender who's very well capable of shutting that down. He just gets up, gets in your face. You do not have time to think or to jig.
Maybe he ships it on and then it's not in Smith's hands anymore, it's in someone else, and that's step one for the defence. You want to try and pressure and unsettle that young lad, and pressure the other halfback in Randall as well. Like, try and make that young halfback combination doubt themselves, and then you can kind of get on top and edge things in the defensive end. And then similarly, the kicking game, always pivotal in this one, trusting that back three pendulum to kind of diffuse the very good variety of attacking kicks that England will probably present them with.
It's been the most consistently painful picture Eddie Jones has wrought upon Ireland, as little grubbers once they get to the edge, once they get to that outside. If Gary Ringrose's shoot doesn't shut them down, very often the next thing that happens, be it on this phase or the following phase, is the pendulum is upset, the wingers have come up, and we're going to just dump a little kick in behind, and all of a sudden Ireland find it very tough to deal with. That
turn and then that pace and then that race is on, and it does look very helter-skelter and tough to deal with.
Was it the last time in Twickenham that Sexton had that bad one where the ball set up and he dropped it and then it was a try?
Like those kinds of chaos plays are you want to just limit them by being kind of accurate.
Deal with it.
You do also
have to deal with those balls when they come.
Big job for Hugo and the rest of the back three to just be alive to that danger and to bring their own kicking boots with them as well, because obviously that middle third kicking duel will decide a lot about who gets to be proactive in this game, and there'll be both sides will get their purple patches, and Ireland need to be clinical with theirs, but being aware of that kicking threat and being alive to the danger, and then being accurate enough to defuse it and get on with their own game.
And that's it now. That's where the long left boot of Lowe, like you'd imagine Lowe is in this team because of his long left boot, and that has to become a factor. They have to have a mind to what Wales did to the English offence by just
field and kicking it long.
Exactly. Just go for as much as you can get out of that ball if you have the space and time to do so, rather than seeking touch. The thing is, Ireland, from a defensive point of view, they can get a bit raggedy when the play stays alive, and it's not something you'd recommend they do against a team like France. But when England are so reliant on their own line-out ball, Ireland should consider just hammering the ball deep, exiting as best they can, forcing England to kick back to you, and then edging that battle. And then once they get the ball up and around that midfield, they're going to trust their own offence to run and to rumble and to control the game in that way. And if they can be the side that holds onto the ball in the middle of the field and does so with success, then they could be in a position where they control the game away from home.
Absolutely. With all that said, how do you see it going? What do you think?
I'm always blur visioned when
the green lens descends.
I don't know. It's tough to say definitively one way or the other.
It's very much that. I will definitively say, come on Ireland, and I think we're going to get the dub and roll on to next week with an away win under our belt. That'd be my ideal scenario, but I think it's going to be a one-score game either way. I think we're in for a tight, kind of very physical battle that'll be decided by a couple of moments of quality on either side, but I think it'll be no holds barred anyway, in a very intense atmosphere in Twickenham, and I think Ireland will arrive to play, so I'm hopeful that we can just get the result. It's a bold statement, but I'm going to go with you on this one. Obviously my lens is totally clouded, so I think it's rational, but God, I don't know. We try and be as unbiased as we can, but we don't in the Irish circles, because it's
tough. I mean, exactly, but I do trust what Sexton has brought to this Irish offence. I do think even the fact that they adjusted so well against France, obviously what they can't afford is to get blown away by England.
The first quarter is
the
so
same
important.
way they did against France. I mean, that's what could happen
to the pitch.
That's what could happen. Yeah, exactly. So they have to be there. They have to be physical from the off. But if they are, and they do generate that kind of game, I do think that they will unseat the English defence. I do think that Elliot Daly will be overloaded by what Sexton and that offence are bringing.
Probably not shutting it down quite as effectively as Gael Fickou was.
Exactly. And I do back them to open up England and find a couple of key tries and find themselves down in the right areas of the field more often than not from that midfield offensive set. So I love what we're doing on offence. I love the Irish attack, so I'm going to trust us to get the win in Twickenham and bring it to the last weekend.
That's what we got, because we're green-eyed people in this regard whenever this clash rolls around, how can we, like, it's tough to make anyone other than England favourites in Twickenham, but they're not my favourites in Twickenham. But that's who we got. Who do you got in this awesome climactic match in on Saturday evening? We got Ireland. Have you got England? Let us know down in the comments below. But with that, I think we are going to park the Six Nations and move on.
Absolutely.
Next up, we're looking at action from the Rugby Europe Championship, and yeah, it's the business end in this one as well. The same equation as the Six Nations. It's the final 2 weekends. The gap weeks are done. No more of that. Just the sprint finish, and it has extra stakes in this one because, as we've been highlighting all year, this is the second half of this 2-year Rugby World Cup qualifying process that has been very cutthroat, and with many teams improving throughout, and all of them with real legitimate aspirations to get that ticket to France. And it's coming down to the wire now. We have 2 massive games this weekend, and they will likely be decisive in this.
Yeah, no question. I mean, the standard has been breathtaking. The sheer volume of points being scored has been mesmerising as well. It has become a truly offensive competition in all the best ways. It's been brilliant to watch, and there are 4 stellar sides that are going to go into 3 places, 2 of which will automatically make it to the World Cup, one of which will be firm favourites against whoever comes out of that US and Chile competition, along with the other qualifiers. They will be absolute favourites for that competition, such has been the standard of Europe. So it'll be one unlucky side of these 4 great sides that will miss out. We're going to just check first of all on the 2022 log, the log that of the competition that's ongoing at the moment, and obviously we have Spain top of the table, 3-0 so far, 3 wins from 3. Brilliant performances, well worthy of their place atop with 13 points. Romania 2-1 after that heavy defeat to Spain in Madrid last time out. They linger behind on 8 points. Georgia obviously just 1-0 one win, 1 draw. Just the 2 games played. It remains to be seen what would be done with these Russia fixtures, whether they'll be voided, whether they'll be 28-0. If it's to be 28-0, as is now talked about as a potential possibility, Georgia would be just behind Spain on 12 points going into this weekend. And then obviously you've got Portugal level with Georgia on 7 points through 3 games themselves, having suffered a defeat and a draw, winning the competition. Probably a tough step here for Portugal.
Yes, one would think,
from there. But
that's not really the big show. No, this is how it stands in the context of this year's tournament and last year's tournament, which combine to form the qualification for the Rugby World Cup. And as it stands there, Georgia sitting atop that log with 31 points. A victory this week will ice that one for them mathematically, which is a good place to be.
Indeed, as would a 28-0 win over Russia,
which is to transcribe or is to transpire. Then they're looking safe enough for Europe 1. In other words, are Georgia, as you were kind of bookies' favourites going into that 2 years. But what's
the
more
Grand Slam helped them last year.
Grand Slam helped them last year. But what's more interesting is what's the battle in behind them for the second automatic qualifying spot. Spain currently atop of that log with 25. Behind them, then Romania on 22 and Portugal on 21. And those three go into 2 over the next couple of weeks, and it remains to be seen who will be top of that. If they're to avoid the Russia results, that would knock Spain down. If they're to do 28-0 instead, that'll keep them holding their good Russia results. So it's very much coming down to these games this weekend, really, to be deciding who's going to end up where in this when they finish jostling for position at the end.
Absolutely. There are still some Russian machinations to be figured out. Russia, of course, having been kicked entirely out of World Rugby, eliminated as a member.
Yes,
and rightly
indeed.
So. They were due to play the Netherlands this coming weekend. Obviously that match not going ahead, be it a 28-0 win to the Netherlands or however they want to calculate it. I think the Netherlands are in a great position where they will be safe. Given just Russia's absence now from the competition, it would make sense, and I believe they probably will just elevate the winners of the Tier 2 competition.
Or someone else, whoever manages to get in from there.
Absolutely. So I imagine that's the way they'll go. But yes, putting the machinations to the side, we have 2 huge games in the context of the World Cup and of this fabulous competition, and they're just big games from the point of view of just enjoying great games, because they are going to be peaches, the pair of them. We're starting in Bucharest as Romania host Georgia in that Arc de Triomphe Stadium. That's going to be Saturday, this coming Saturday. It's going to be kicking off at 3:30 GMT or 5:30 PM local time. Still not a huge fan of it clashing with the Six Nations, but be that as it may, you can get it online on the Rugby Europe and watch it after the fact. Not a huge fan of the fact that they seem to put the score up.
Yes, I don't know who
as
does
you
that.
try and
Actually,
stream
I'm just
that.
that's a bone to pick, because I have had to watch these games back post thing, and I have had them spoiled, and I don't understand. You go live with the live stream anyway. You have to go back retroactively to edit it to include the scoreline. Just don't. Don't do that.
If you watch it delayed and click on it before the video even starts, the final score pops up in the middle of the screen in an unavoidable way. They definitely shouldn't do. But be that as it may, Romania will be hosting Georgia in a huge game. This is the Rugby Europe El Clasico, if you would. This is the game that almost, if not always, decides who wins this competition. The Oaks and the Lelos. Last year it was won in Tbilisi by the Georgians, who have dominated this fixture in recent years, 28-17. They won it last year, very similar result to a lot of what's happening. Just the 1 point separating these two sides between second and third on the 2022 table, obviously with the Russian results to come in.
But that's Georgia having only played the two games, so a game in hand in that regard. But they are currently in third going into that, with Romania obviously in second. Another good bit of colour is actually that Georgia will hold its 250th test game.
Test match ever.
So that's a big one for them, away from home obviously, and against the old rivals. So possibly some niggle in this one, but it should be good to see some fans, both travelling and home fans, in that Arc de Triomphe, which is a lovely stadium, and these two great sides to go at it once more.
Absolutely. But we're going to start just by looking at it from the point of view of each team, and we're going to start obviously with the hosts, that is Romania. A win here for the Oaks would change the game entirely and put them in a great position to really attack that Europe 2 spot, especially with Spain still having to play Georgia. It would also
Portugal
put them
this weekend.
It would also put them in a great spot to potentially go ahead and win this competition, despite that bruising result that they took against the Spanish last week. They have been a bit confident with it. They've been bullish in terms of their pre-match. They've been talking up a big game, Andy Robinson and his troops, and yet they have to bounce back after that tough week last week. As far as the squads are concerned, they've added a couple of players to their tight five stocks. Antonescu, who was a bit of a penalty machine last week, he's gone actually from the whole squad. Taurus as well. So actually they've added Anthony Ursashi, who's come back out of international retirement, the veteran 37-year-old loosehead. And they've actually also added a fella called George Gagion, who's switched nationality from Moldova.
Interesting.
Which has some quality to it, the Moldovans. Their union has been in a terrible state, but they actually have had some players who've mixed in decent European leagues. And actually, prior to their disbandment, Russia were kind of plundering them, and Romania have plundered them a little bit as well, in terms of that new switch eligibility rule.
No, indeed. So that's a good, viable option for a lot of those kinds of players to get into teams like this.
I dare say as well that Rupanu will come back in at scrum half for Suragiu, who had a tough game.
He did struggle in that last outing, and they definitely need a bit of pace off the base to get those forward runners and those dynamic centres on the ball as well. Like that, Velvasa and Tamani probably had their toughest test last week, and they were shocked a bit by what Jimeno and the like were bringing against them. But they still fired back, like 2 tries for Velvasa himself. Like they have quality with that whip ball in hand, so they've
quality all over. It just takes them. It seems to take them a while to warm to the task of games. And there's no doubt that last week they just started too slowly.
They did.
It was just way too slow.
It wasn't. You couldn't even individually highlight anyone. It was just slower across the board than what Spain were bringing.
Their first few offensive sets were a cold drop from Tamani, a cold drop from Vavasa off first phase, and then the next one was a first phase hit up from which they box kicked very slowly without thinking of doing anything else. And before they knew it, they were out of the game against Spain.
They can't afford that, because Georgia have bolstered their offense themselves, and they'll be bullish about putting the Romanians to task from minute one. So you got to think arriving to the pitch for this one isn't going to be an issue as much. it's probably one, and it seems to have been one that's been in their thoughts and in their kind of messaging to the team throughout the whole tournament. It looks like one they've been eyeballing for quite a while to try and give these Georgians a proper rattle this time on home turf.
Yeah, no question. I do think it's a fair criticism of Andy Robinson's side that their offence, while much more effective than it used to be from sheer quality of personnel, like the likes of Melinte even and the two wingers, Nutu as well, who's been in and out, and even Simoniescu who had that flying finish last week, along with the two big boys in the centre. Like, they've real quality, they've guys who can execute plays. Their offense is probably lacking a little in sophistication.
Somewhat. It's quite young. It's quite a young offense. They're new personnel in there. Like, at the start of last season, it was still the old man Vlaiku at 10 and kicking threes from everywhere. Like, it's quite new.
No question. And you look at the Jimeno intercept try that they took. Like, when you freeze frame that and watch what they were doing off that scrum, it was the three. It was play. Tomani and Valvasa all running very flat, attacking a very narrow portion of space, and playing an option to hit a short ball to Tomani or a slightly less short ball to Valvasa. And Jimeno
they chose
banked
short
on the
ball to Jimeno instead.
Well, indeed, Jimeno picked the line between the two of them and ended up picking off the ball and scoring. That's not good enough. When you've got explosive operators like these guys, you've got to be working them into a space a little bit better than that.
Sure.
It can't just be these hit-ups and these kind of straightforward plays where you're going round the corner. Against the Georgians, that's not going to cut it.
You're going to want to try and create good little designs to get one-on-one matchups and try and occupy and overload guys like Sharakadze on the other side, who are such key men in their defensive system that if you can occupy him and then fold quickly with quick ball, then you'll find the kind of space that those guys have shown the ability to cut good lines and do damage.
Valvasa has been like their explosive offensive operator, but if you look at some of the plays he's produced, it's just been a case of him getting like a one out ball, sitting a guy down, handing off another, and then he's away. Like, if you can work him into some space, you're going to be way more effective.
Indeed, no, that's true. That's the next stage of evolution from the offensive point of view for this Romania team. But the task doesn't stop offensively. Like, defensively, this Georgian challenge has got tougher than it already is. They already know about the tight five challenges and the scrummaging that's going to be tested, the maul that's going to be tested, but now this Georgia team are moving the pill with a bit more assured kind of confidence and a bit more tempo with Aprasidze and Labzanadze. Now they have two halfbacks who can control tempo and kind of get those big forwards running around the corner at them. So defensively they're going to have to arrive to the pitch of the battle. They can't afford a repeat of last week where they were caught flat-footed and caught cold by a very quick offence in Spain, but they can't be underestimated. Like, it'll be a slower offence in Georgia. It won't be quite as like helter-skelter tempo, but it's not going to be slow. They're going to move things quickly and they're going to be big and physical, and they have to be alive to that danger.
Yeah, they were against Portugal in moments, but they do need to arrive to a ferocious pitch of the game. One of the things, like in terms of the obviously, if they can operate with a bit more intensity in the middle of the field, that will resolve a lot of those early stages problems that they were having, not kicking passively, not playing passively. That'll resolve some of the penalties even they were giving up, and the territory
all of that
deficiency
cascades
that they had
from that kind of reactive play that they were up to. They need to be proactive on both sides of the pill regardless.
Totally. But if they can settle into the game, matching Georgia in those physical stakes, giving as good as they get on both offensive defence, then they can hopefully work themselves some good offensive sets where they have some real weapons. Their offensive maul, like when
very
you
good.
match it with Georgia's defensive maul, which has been a little ropey, granted, being tested against tier 1 sides, we're judging this. Like, they can potentially have an in that maul area.
They should. They should be looking to that area and that set piece to try and get some inroads against Georgia. They should also be brave enough to run at them and attack them, kind of resource their own breakdown, recycle, and go after them a few times. They have decent halfbacks themselves. They have good quality. Try and ask a few questions of the Georgians, even if that maul gets stymied. But don't be afraid to go to the corner even early on and take the game to them. Try and get the crowd involved in that way. Get that Arc de Triomphe crowd singing and we're getting raucous, because you know that they're all going to be up for that. It's Georgia who are in town. It's the big guns. You want to try and arrive to the pitch and kind of put them on the back foot immediately. Have them be the ones who are taking a back step or shocked at how intense and how ferocious the Oaks are being in this.
And that's where the likes of these back row guys, Daragh, Sayre, Gorin, McAvee, the captain,
they've
been good so far this year in moments. they have to be way better, because the Georgian back row
it's the biggest
test
test of the year for all of them, and the tight head, as is always the case for any tight head who isn't Georgian in this tournament. Biggest test of the year, Georgia,
no question. If Nariashvili is who they go for this week, it is a case of pick your poison, but he has been particularly monstrous in this tournament to the scrum time. But their back row that's going to face them this week is going to be extremely tough to deal with. They have to play with intensity. They have to win those collisions, otherwise it will be a long day. What Romania have been bringing is that physical intensity that's worn on teams. It's not going to wear on Georgia the same way it can wear on a Spanish team or a Portuguese team. Georgia will be there in those physical battles for the full 80. But if they can match them, if they can use that physicality that has bullied those Iberian sides to match Georgia, then they can make a game of it and hopefully develop more on offense and have some width on defense as well. Because Vajavasa got opened up a few times. They are going to have to keep their spacing. Georgia will want to go wide. That's something that he has to work on as well.
True enough. But they should be confident in their fitness levels. They've been finishing games pretty strongly, so go after them from minute one and be confident that if it's tight in the final quarter, that they'll still have a little bit something left in the gas tank to go again, because they have demonstrated that on a few occasions this season as well. So don't be afraid, be brave, and be proactive. If you're Romania, get after Georgia. That's the first port of call on both sides of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the Leilos point of view, from the point of view of Georgia, obviously they haven't played now for a few weeks due to their previous fixture being cancelled, obviously with the Russians. And then
questions of rust, maybe.
Questions of rust, no question. Obviously, the last game that they played was the kind of non-event against the Dutch, and then their only outing really this year was the 25-all nosebleed kind of result against Portugal. What I will say though to counter that is that their squad is very exciting. This is the most exciting that the Georgian squad has been since the start of the year, without a doubt. They're kind of fit. They're looking fit. They could potentially field a back line of Aprasidze, Absendadze. At halfback, obviously, Sharakadze and Kvesaladze back in there in the centre, and then Niniashvili back healthy, playing top couture's footy.
Playing brilliantly last weekend in the top couture, so he was.
He's consistently brilliant, this kid. He's going to come in at fullback, and then they've obviously got the wonderful Tabitsadze on the right wing with one of Meshki or Todua or Tapladze to put in on the other wing. And
genuine danger.
And burying the lead here as well, because guess who's back? Saganadze's in the squad this week. That's just different gravy.
Useful unit, because Jalagonia's been doing a good job for them and stuff, but and getting a unit like that back.
They could have Jalagonia, Becca Gregadze and Saganadze in the one back row. They also got Tsutskaridze. Maybe you could say that Gregadze and Jalagonia are both natural eights, so one or the other of them starts.
And then have some bench impact. It's possible.
Those are four explosive, dynamic, quick, powerful operators that are much better than, to be honest with you, than the back rows that played against Portugal. I actually don't think any of them. No, they had one of those four. They had Jalagonia against Portugal, none of the others. That is a game-changing back row. That is actually the basis, more even than the front row. For this Georgian side, it is all about the back row forwards and their explosivity and power.
And their ball play. Some of their ball playing ability is very good as well. Yeah, they've improved in that area. So they're always spoiled for choice in some of those loose forwards, stocky men that they have. But those three that you're citing there are just really, really good. Those four even that you're citing there, really, really good operators. And if they're going to try and impose themselves on Romania, it'll involve that breakdown battle. It'll involve all of the purview of that back row.
Saganadze saying to McAvee, sit down, son.
Get out of the way.
That's the kind of key.
That's what they want to create. Is yes, they want to move with a bit more speed and try and develop their offense, but it is built on dynamism and power through that collision zone that they just love, and it's setting that template, particularly away from home against this old rival that is the Oaks. If they can sit down, like you say, Captain McAvee, perfect, run through him, set the tone early on, and just from then kind of roll on into your own offensive sets. They should be confident of, with the supremacy they've enjoyed in this fixture over the last few years, just be confident of, if it does get tight, even if things go against them for a wee while, no need to panic. They do display good patience generally in this tournament, and they should lean on that here. They know that it'll come good for them if they stick to their process, so just be the patient side, be the physical, powerful side, and try and impose themselves on what Romania are bringing. Yeah,
indeed. And from a defensive point of view, we saw Spain do kind of a bit of a job on Romania early doors, and certainly from a Georgian point of view, if you're looking at taking the Oaks' kind of key strengths against them and kind of exposing them for being perhaps a little limited on offense still, even though they've expanded so much, you can probably boil down their strengths to three key areas. So basically the midfield hit up off set pieces they go back to again and again and again. It'll be Tamani or Vajavasa, and that is how they'll start every set. And that is the job of if it's a shortened line out, you'd be tempted to put Saganadze or one of the back row forwards out there
to smash those guys.
So it's Goridza maybe, and then also Sharakadze, who does their leading of that defence and reading of the game.
Does a fine job of it at the minute as well.
He's playing very well, captaining the side, leading them well from 12, as so many 12s do in this tournament. He's shutting down that midfield as Spain did, with just intensity and good reading of the game and a bit of power, just exposing the Romanian offence for not having that much deception to it. That's a key starting point. Then obviously the other two areas that Romania have been able to exploit to make hay: the maul, first of all.
Maul, defensive maul, big task, because sometimes those locks are found wanting a little bit on the defensive end.
And you'd wonder whether like Jalagonia or someone like that might be better placed to play that kind of defensive maul pivot position where you're the guy who's angling to get the ball carrier a little more, rather than one of the more stocky locks that they have in there, and they should just focus on getting kind of a cohesive defensive drive with Jalagonia or someone in that position.
You definitely need someone doing that, but it is a truth of not just this tournament but tier 2 tournaments in general, that defensive mauls just don't come as easy as offensive mauls, and all sides tend to have a good offensive maul, and part of Georgia's plan will be to get their own maul rolling, and that's fine, but stopping the Romanian maul, because it is such a crucial in for them, and it is just a little bit of respite for their forwards that they do like to go to. So if you can take that away from them and deprive them that at home, you'll go a long way towards deciding the contest.
And then the third area that Romania have been able to exploit that they haven't been stopped doing yet is the sort of relentless physicality of their one-out runners that tends to tell come third and fourth quarter, where they just go around the corner.
Against both Iberian sides, you saw them finish the stronger because of that.
Just round the corner, with Rupanu driving that tempo, and that's where Georgia will really back themselves to be physical, strong, and say to Romania,
swallow them up with a choke tackle or something.
You can't do this to us. We're just as strong as you. Smash them back. And if they do that on the defensive end, if they can have success in the defensive maul, in shutting down the midfield hit up and in stopping those power one out runners from the ruck, the game will pretty much be theirs already. That is
true, and then it's up to their own accuracy and their own kind of play design and patience with ball in hand to try and grab the scores they need to see them home. But those three areas that you highlighted there, pretty pivotal parts of the Georgian game plan to shut down Romania first and foremost, and then
this isn't old school Georgia either. This is a Georgian team, like their explosive runners, be they Niniashvili or Saganadze, are on the edge. Like
Jalagonia hangs out on the wing a lot as well.
They're going to look to play with width and tempo in a way that they haven't for many years really. And we even saw it against Portugal in that last play that unfortunately didn't yield a try, where they might have just stopped and gone down the middle and tried to score that way, like Romania probably would have, and they might have won the game there in that last play if they'd done that. But so determined are they to play with speed that they went down the wing and made a line break on the right hand side, then flashed it across to the left hand side, then flashed it back to the right hand side, and it was only a desperation play from, I believe it was one of the Portuguese wingers, might have been Storti, no, it was Marta made a great defensive play to hold on to the draw for Portugal. As it was in that instance, they should have probably kept it tight and found the win that way. But against Romania, I think that offense has all kinds of potential. And if they can get Niniashvili
back in the fold now, that changes the dynamic of their wide game. Even if it was a bit naive in that instance, it's less so when you have Niniashvili out there, because he might make something happen. Very true. And trusting Aprasidze initially and the halfback to kind of set the tempo, but also Tato at 10 is a key difference maker in this tournament for them. Is just the quality of that guy at 10. Like he
reads the game very well.
He's very good. His kicking game is very, very good. If they can turn those big Georgian forwards, those big Romanian forwards with some good kicks, kind of catch them discombobulated in the backfield and then put the squeeze on that way as well. It'll just slowly but surely making those heads drop, because the confidence is only based on evidence, and Georgia have all the confidence to mine in this one. They've been successful for so many years.
With all that said, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a tough one actually, to be honest. I'm not sure what to expect from Georgia now that we haven't seen them in a few weeks, and then the last time was the Holland game as well. But I do suspect they will have too much for Romania. But I'm hoping that we see some good hustle from Romania too, and maybe a couple of good tries. To be honest, I'm anticipating a good game here, but I think Georgia will just prove the slightly further down the road in terms of both sides are developing. But Georgia are a little further down. I would imagine. I think they'll grab a few nice tries to see see them home.
Yeah, I think I agree. Obviously, I'm banking on Saganadze being back. He hasn't featured yet for Lyon. He was picked in the squad, and I believe Maisashvili was saying, like, I hope he's good and ready to play. Yeah. But they did name him in the squad. If he's in there, I think, and if he's anywhere like his best, that's just a difference maker. But even the return of Beka Gorgadze since that, and Tutskeridze since that Portugal game, like, I was doubting them in that Portugal game because they were a little light on their best players, and they were playing a few guys who hadn't even been capped, like the guy on the bench who was covering the back row hadn't even been capped. Like, this is different gravy. These guys, this back row that they can pick now that's back in the squad is very, very good and actually better than any of the other back rows in the competition. I think, and very comfortably. Considering
if the games are tight, it'll be decided by things like breakdown, supremacy, and
just the contacts, the sheer explosive contacts out of them. Add to that Niniashvili, add to that how impressed I am by the offense. I think that Georgia have too much for Romania. I still think they're the best team in this competition. I think they're going to show it here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But that's who we got. We're back in Georgia. You don't tend to get far backing anyone other than Georgia in this game. But who do you got? Let us know in the comments down below. Where are you watching it from? Are you in Bucharest or are you Tbilisi? Any of that, just drop it down below in the comments.
Absolutely. But with that, we're going to move on and take a look at the other game. And gee whiz, the stakes. You thought they were high in that Georgia-Romania game. They couldn't be higher in this one. Somebody is going home in tears after this one. Yeah. Madrid is going to be the scene of the bloodbath, the Iberian derby from hell.
Indeed, much anticipated.
Versus Portugal in the Estadio Central in UCM in Madrid. This is going to be kicking off on Sunday. Great occasion. They should have put all the games on Sunday, given the Six Nations doesn't clash with them. But it'll be out there by itself. 1:45 local time, 11:45 UK and Irish time. Obviously, much anticipated game. It's finally here. It's finally upon us.
Los Leones versus Os Lobos, the Wolves and the Lions going at it.
And Los Leones are the form side in this competition.
They are.
Coming off victories 38-21 over Romania, huge victory. They had big victories over Russia when they were still a thing, and the Dutch as well. They're obviously 4 points ahead on the qualifier table
and riding a 5-game win streak into this one, which is pretty good stuff. Portugal did win their last as well, but 5 games in a row.
It feels like they're in a position, they're the 4-game advantage over Portugal, the 4-point advantage over Portugal, where you might be inclined to think, a losing bonus point isn't the worst thing for them. They do play Georgia next weekend. That is a huge factor here. I believe that's in Tbilisi.
Yes.
So they really aren't in a position where they can afford to lose this game. No. If they lose this game, they could find themselves ousted again and right back in the heat of it. They're at home here in front of their fans in UCM. This is the game to make it count. And if they do execute it, if they do find the win,
if they turn up like they did in that Romania game and play that game, maybe it'll be more than enough.
And they'll have found just one of the great comebacks from nowhere a year ago. They were giving away red cards. They were melting down before our very eyes. To see them rally and come back like this, they're one game away now from completing that story.
Mighty impressive. So and the flip side from Portugal point of view is that the victory is now an absolute must. They're 4 points adrift. They just have to win. If they don't, they are going to be out, and that's unfortunate for them. Unsurprisingly, this fixture is the one with the most history with both of these teams. They've played each other loads of times. Spain historically have dominated it, 26-11-2 record overall. But the last time that they played was last year, and Portugal took a resounding victory in that one. That was in Lisbon, but 43-28. Very good score. And Portugal's penchant for scoring tries could see them do damage to the Spanish hopes yet. But as you say, we are going to look at both teams and how they want to get after this one in this all-important Iberian grudge match. And we're going to start with the host, which are Spain. Santiago Santos will likely select the side that did such a great job against Romania.
Clean bill of health.
No injuries in that one, and just a fantastic performance. So very much an if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset to that, and let the guys go out and do it again for you. Defence was very impressive against Romania, to be honest. They managed to shut them down very, very early on, and they know that they're going to be challenged by this high-flying Portugal team that now has some returning operators of high quality as well. So.
Yeah, indeed. It's a different challenge this week, but a similar one in the sense that the way they approached the game last week was it was wise in the sense that they did their homework on Romania. They saw the success that Romania had been having through that midfield, and they shut it down. They shut it down off first phase consistently every time in that opening 30 minutes. and now they're going to have done different homework on this very different Portuguese offence, and come out with a plan basically to stymie that. The Lobos are going to try and hit them with wide passing. They're going to try and get their wingers involved near enough off every play. There'll be one winger on the edge, there'll be another winger coming on Portella's inside. Those are the kind of plays to watch out for. You can't sit down on Appleton once he gets the ball, because he's going to fizz a pass over the top.
Indeed.
Like Jimeno and his brilliant defensive reading is going to be less in the game, because Portugal don't tend to use their midfield as a hit-up option like Romania do.
It's true.
So I'll be curious to see how Spain adjust to that. They'll need to be aggressive around the ruck, slow, making things messy for Marrakesh, but they will need to be well spaced.
Stay connected and try and bottle up that inside and force Portugal into blind alleys there. Then you can gobble them up, because physically they probably do have a slight advantage here in terms of just physicality across the board, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you kind of get flat-footed or get caught ball watching against this Portugal side.
Absolutely. One area that they will back themselves, the loose forward defence is going to have to be very miserly on the inside, just watching those inside balls that Portela loves to go to. I'll imagine they'll have done their homework on that and be ready to line up any wingers in and around the fringes. I think gone are the days in this tournament of just no pillars and Portugal able to make hay in that way. You can't allow them to do that.
Force them to score a different
try. That was
try.
Last year.
Force them to stick 2 or 3 passes before they find their way through. But squeeze them in the tight is definitely an area, because the Spanish back was very, very impressive, and it wasn't just the back row, it was the tight 5 as well against Romania. It was very
the two
good.
locks, Mora and Guillaume, who were just shutting down Romanian mauls for fun by the end of the game, but also had these physical contacts where they were forming mauls. Those guys, huge assets.
Put themselves on the Portuguese tight 5, because that is where Portugal have tended to show their Achilles heel, and just kind of fading with that physicality and just kind of having it wear on them, particularly if they're away from home here as well. Make them feel it in the intensity of the collision area, and just the kind of workload and the work rate of your forward pack in general. If you can put themselves about and put them to task like that, you'll be able to kind of squeeze Portugal and suck the life out of them, and hopefully get good returns in the second half when they're starting to fly.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, like, there will be moments in this game when Portugal get on top of them, but they trust their own offense. The Spanish offense is so good, they trust it to do the job.
Indeed.
So they
Rue
should be,
and Ordas get them moving.
Exactly. So they should be confident of their ability to score tries on one end, to the point where they know that it'll just take a few big defensive stands. Like, they might concede 2 tries, they might concede 3 tries, but in 1 or 2 occasions to be able to choke them, hold them up, force a scrum, and then launch yourselves, that could be the difference between winning or losing. Sure, look at the score in the last year's game, 43-28.
Indeed.
We've seen a lot of that this year. So Spain, just from a defensive point of view, 1 or 2 big plays, and then the other areas, like when you do get opened up, which will happen on occasions in this game in Madrid, it does, like, calm down and don't compound the issue. Like, it's one thing going down to 14 against Romania, but when the way Portugal play, the extent to which they stretch the whole field, you'll feel 14 men differently against Portugal. You really will.
It's going to be it'll be a costly card if they are to get one, and it is still a bad habit that when they are under the cosh, because you got to accept that they will be. You're right in saying, like, points will happen. Portugal will score points against them. You got to accept that. You got to be kind of realistic in that approach and not allow it to be a panic play that you're doing that it ultimately ends up yielding some penalty, try, yellow card or something, and that is just a nightmare scenario all of a sudden, where it didn't really need to be. A 5 or a 7 pointer can be chalked off with your own 5 or 7 pointer.
It's crazy consistent from them as well.
It is.
Like, it's
not even
it's
happened
1 or 2 cards every game.
Last week or 2 weeks ago against Romania was one of the best performances I've seen from a Spanish rugby team, and yet still it had a stupid moment of ill discipline that yielded a card. To have 2 of them.
2 cards in the game.
Yeah, so it's just like, it's way too consistent, and it's going to be costly if they just don't need to react the way they do. They make it very obvious, particularly like sacking mauls the way that they do sometimes, just devoid of subtlety and devoid of kind of macro rationale or like rational thinking, going like, it's not the end of the world if they it's not the end of the world if we concede a 7 pointer. It could be if we concede a red card with it. Then it's like,
absolutely. One of the more positive points from them, though, one of the key points of difference that was there against Romania that they'll look to go back to, was the sheer quality of that kicking game. And I'll tell you what, in moments, Ordas, you talk about Tato Absendadza, Ordas looks like well ready for prime time in that sense. He looks like, hey, French top tours clubs, pick me up, lad. He looked really good last week. Some of the kicks that came out of him were
and
fabulous.
That Madrid air, they do fly as well, but they all strike them well. And actually, to be fair, Portugal will be bringing a bit of that as well. I'd expect some of the midfield kicking to be just of a stellar quality for a tier 2 clash, because you'll be looking at really good footballing guys pinging balls back and forth.
100%. But I also think like Spain will fancy themselves having the edge, particularly at home, and it is the kind of thing that could decide a game. The territory, just at the odd 50-22. I mean, the side with the most offensive sets is going to be the side that wins this game. Probably.
Yeah, probably true. So making sure that Spain are on the right side of that will hinge a lot on their halfbacks, but also their dogged forwards and their back
they
field.
can all kick a ball.
They all can, and just be proactive with their kicking game and ask a few good questions and set themselves up for good red zone drives and get some points on the board. That's got to be about it. What it's about. That UCM stadium, the surface is nice on it for running rugby. They do like to run the ball themselves. Expect some high scoring stuff. Don't panic when Portugal are in their purple patch, but be ready to kind of strike back. And also like recognizing key moments as well. Like Romania did a great job against Portugal of, even when they were running away with it in their purple patch, pegging them back with one before half time. Having recognition of those moments and dialing that in could be a good in for Spain to kind of discourage Portugal as well.
Yeah, no question. The Portuguese can be got at. But as I said, they should trust their offense. Their offense at its best in burying the lead in terms of what they were. The reason we're not focusing on it is because you trust it at this stage so much to deliver. They are relentless. Their offloading is probably what separates them more than anything. They run great tracking lines, and once the line is broken, they all throw brilliant offloads. There's basketballs from 1 through 15 through 23. They can all stick a pass. They all have a great read on the game. It's rather French-like in the way that they execute and find delicious tries.
And Jimeno run betwixt Appleton and Portela all day and scythe through that little line that he runs very, very well.
I mean, that captain's battle in the 12 shirt between Appleton and Jimeno is box office itself. But I mean, since the beginning of last year, they have, since including all Rugby Europe games since the beginning of last year, including their poor start to it, they have averaged 36 points per game in this competition.
Awesome.
Insane return. And if they can deliver the more of the same, mind their discipline, mind their defense, and
get the scores on the board,
they'll be in a great position to secure a famous home win and complete the remarkable comeback all the way to the World Cup.
That's the plan from Spain's point of view. But other ideas on the other side for us Lobos, and coach Patrice Legisque will be hoping that this is the time to unstick that Spanish team and bury them, do the double over them, and claim their spot in the World Cup that way. They're going to be expecting that the out half Portela, as we were billing, is going to be back in. They have struggled in his absence. He took a knock in week 1 against the Georgians and hasn't been back on the field since, but they do look better with Marques at 9 and him at 10. Obviously that would be the ideal one, Marques as well, to come back into the team bit from last week and just start pulling strings again and kicking their kicks and whatnot. And
Rafa Storti back as well.
He got some minutes. That gives some good headaches because both of those Pintos were playing well, and they still have a Marta on one wing who's not going anywhere.
Indeed, so they have lovely options on the field. They can start Storti maybe on the bench and go with what they've had, or they could bring him in. There has been electric plays from those back three players. They did a great job. One forgets living with the power game that Romania and Georgia brought in the opening 2 rounds. They relented ultimately towards the tail end of the second game.
The second game was too much for them. 2 big away trips to Eastern Europe side, to the big sides. This is their last away trip of the calendar year and their last fixture to fulfill. So there's no reason to not empty the gas tank completely in this one, and they'd hope to see a proper 80-minute showing now with the week off, because they did finish the game well even in that week 1 in Georgia, and I'd expect with everything on the line, you'd expect them to be going for the full hog for the 80 minutes.
Absolutely. The one area you'd worry about is the defense. It matched up pretty well against Georgia in large stages. Like, you had those great that great last stand on the goal line after Georgia had opened them up to stop them from scoring. You had long protracted sequences against Romania, particularly in the first half, where the Oaks couldn't get anything off against them. This is a different level job. This Spanish team has been electric. You've got to obviously have eyes on Jimeno on the inside.
You do.
But they are going to be determined to give a good show of themselves. It's the toughest task that they'll have had defensively in a long while, and a bit as it was with Spain, it'll take 1 or 2 key moments to unseat them. But the other area that kind of determines the game as well, the kicking game that we were talking about with Spain, in terms of setting up the field position that gives one side more drives than the other. Portugal, their kicking game needs to be slightly different for me. They need to kick to recover because their wingers and their back three players in general are phenomenal in the air.
Marta and Storty are brilliant in the air, the pair of them. They've yielded a fair few tries over the last couple of years, but even good defensive kind of interception, like really good educated stuff in the aerial contest. And with a boot like Marquesh's, you should be going to that. He dictates things from the base anyway. Get those box kicks going, get the chase going, try and get the back three down
kicks
themselves.
On an occasion. They've yielded tries for them.
Yeah.
You're getting Marta and Storty involved any way that they can.
And bypassing the likes of Jimeno and Ordas and Rue entirely, and just kind of making it not about them, and being the smarter, more savvy, more quick team, which is difficult because these are the two probably quickest teams in the competition, and it is Spain's home ground. But Portugal have prided themselves on being not just quick but clever in the way that they move the pill and the areas they look to attack.
Just present a different picture, like play some ruck avoidance, keep the tempo going. You know Marquesh can do that. You know that they've got the dynamic runners to open things up. You trust the handling skills of Lima and Appleton on the inside as well, so you can go there too. But it needs to be up tempo, quick, and just presenting a very, very different picture to those Spanish locks that looked very comfortable with what Romania were doing,
and the pace
might not be
Romania,
comfortable.
Exactly. Like if you can, like, yes, the matchup in the tight five is a challenge for them, and they will have to they'll have to throw everything into it because they are probably the smaller side, and they're going to struggle to last the pace because the contacts will be big. But the flip side is with a quick tap followed by a petulant scrag of Marquesh or something, then suddenly they're playing only 14 big men.
Keep the tempo up, you might just get them hot-headed.
Indeed, which is a key factor in trying to unstick Spain, is get them frustrated, get them angry, get them seeing red, and then
all of a sudden they're at home in Madrid, and this is a must-win game, and if it's not going their way, they haven't dealt with pressure too well so far, Spain. So that is the question mark. Can Portugal do that?
Can they turn the screw and put pressure on them? And it's not the same way as traditionally they might do in terms of putting the squeeze on through mauls or whatever. It's a very Portuguese way of doing it, with attack, with speed, with incisiveness, and just with kind of a clever bit of play that backs their skill set. Well, my favourite thing about this team is how much they back their skill set and how much they back themselves to get things done.
You may score 30, but we'll score 40.
That's it. That's the way it's got to be.
Is that the way you see this game going? I'm curious, because it
could tighten up.
They've been brilliant, these offences, and consistently we've been seeing scores in the 40s and 30s from both sides in this competition so far. But with everything on the line in Madrid,
maybe not.
Does it tighten up?
Does it become a box kicking game in the middle third? I don't know. Maybe that's definitely a maybe picture. But no, I think on balance, with the weather the way it is, even if it's tighter, you'll still be looking at like winning score of 30 something, losing score of 20 something kind of. I think both sides will score tries. I just think
offense is too good.
Yeah, I think they're both offenses match up better than the defense on the other end, to be honest. So it'll be about who controls that middle third, whose kicking game is slightly better, whose set piece is slightly better, whose control of their temperament is slightly better in the key moments as well. That'll be the decisive.
So who are you leaning towards, my guy?
Well, I'm gonna hedge and say Portugal, because I want them in.
You love Portugal.
I love Portugal, but to be honest, the momentum's with Spain, and Spain look very, very good as well, and they could, I do see the avenue for Spain to win it as well. I see it going either way, but I'm gonna hedge with Portugal, because I'm in their camp now whole hog. I've just loved what they've done, and I think if there's justice, I think they deserve on balance over their 2-year campaign to get in, but it doesn't always play out that way.
It would be really rough to miss out. They'd miss out on the back really of 2 tough games against Romania if that's the way it does go. I'm torn as well. I can totally see avenues for both teams. I also love Portugal, but I do really respect what Spain have done, and I thought their performance against Romania was outstanding. But then the week prior, I thought Romania's performance against Portugal was outstanding, and the week prior to that, I thought Portugal's performance against Georgia was outstanding. And yet it keeps yinging and yanging and toing and froing, and you don't really know which way it's going to go. But I'm very much torn on it, but I will give the edge to the home side just in UCM.
Home advantage in Madrid, perhaps.
A heartbreaker. Another. You know what? It would be another late winner, and that's potentially the way it'll go for Portugal. Just those last
quarters doing them in, which they have done so far. Yeah, no, it could go that way. I'm gonna hedge with Os Lobos. You got Los Leones. Who do you got? Where are you watching this one from? Let us know in the comments down below. Very excited for these two climactic battles in Rugby Europe and in Rugby World Cup qualifier stakes. It's awesome to see.
The dust will be close to settling come next week. These two games are huge in deciding which ways these European places go. So do join us next week as we'll be looking ahead to the final week of Rugby Europe. But yes, find your way to rugbyeurope.eu and find your way to these games because they are huge this week and the quality is outstanding. It really is.
It's been a fantastic tournament. It really has.
Absolutely. But with that, we are going to move on.
Yes, and we turn our attention now to the Under-20s Six Nations, which has been going alongside the main show as well. So it is now also off its back gap week and back for rounds 4 and 5. And it's been an interesting competition as well. Our own charges, Ireland, sit atop the log with 14 from a possible 15 points. The only team still on for the Grand Slam in this year's comp. And then close behind them on the 2-1 records are England and France, both on 11 points, but England just edging it on points difference by I think about 2 points or something. I mean, it's very tight in that second place. Just a roundup of what happened last week as well. Last time out, we had 43-14 win for England over Wales. We had a 30 points to 17 away win for France over Scotland, and a 39-12 win for Ireland over Italy. So all three of those campaigners kind of rolled on in the middle ground with no issue to their momentum, and a tease up round 4.
Same games coming up this weekend as in the main show. Wales taking on France, Scotland taking on Italy, and England taking on Ireland. This time around it's slightly different. Wales taking on France on the Thursday, so as not to clash with the real Wales-France. And then on the Friday, Italy-Scotland is permitted to clash with the Wales-France game.
Reasonable.
And then England-Ireland is actually on the Saturday evening at 7:15. Now, from an Irish point of view, it's interesting. Like, they've obviously won away in Paris. That's huge. And a Grand Slam with two away wins. And I'm not sure if it was Paris, actually. It might have been Toulon or somewhere. But away in France. But 2 away wins is improbable. It would be amazing to win a Grand Slam that way, but looking at the table and the 3-point buffer that Ireland are bringing into this, if they can get a losing bonus point out of this game with the Scots who've been struggling so far to come in the last week while England have to go and play France away, they could be in a position where it's okay. The only fear that they'd have in that scenario is France catching them, who are also 3 points behind them. They'll play Wales. They'll likely get 5 in that game. And then Ireland might be relying on favours from England in that last weekend to edge a points differential. They are advantaged, but this game against England will probably decide how the comp goes.
It's definitely the big one of the round as well. Wales obviously hosting France as well. France will hope to just roll on with that one and roll into that last weekend, setting up a Le Petit crunch for themselves. But there are 3 teams with serious aspirations of winning it, and big game between England and Ireland as it is in the main show. It's following up from the main show as well. It's going to be a big one on Saturday evening.
We'll either be very happy or very disgruntled. Or somewhere between, if one goes one way and one other. But yes, definitely a big Saturday in all things rugby. But that kind of parks international footy for now, and there's no women's game stuff. The Women's Six Nations is coming up in the near future. Squads have been named, but we will turn our attention to that tournament when it comes around. For now, we're going to look at club footy, as we do, sort of before we wrap up the show. We're going to start just in Europe with the Top 14 in France, where kind of a mad weekend ensued last time out. There were results all around. I mean, Bordeaux, the hosts, slipped to their 4th consecutive defeat now. They had a home loss to Pau and are completely out of form, and opened the door for Montpellier to walk through and take the lead, but for a 25-9 defeat to Cast for Montpellier. All of that leaving the table much tighter. Lyon in 3rd place also slipped up and lost.
They did. Away in Clermont, that one, so a bit more forgivable. Big story of the round, Perpignan, who are in relegation scraps and down at the bottom, but a 34-13 pumping of Racing Metro was quite surprising to see.
Indeed, and all of that, basically all of the underdogs backing out. Stade Francais also edged Toulouse with a dramatic last minute Yanni Lamape made wonder try.
Yes, with 14 men, they were down a man at that point. It was crazy. It was all level score and Toulouse turning the screw as the 80th minute rolled round, and by 82 minutes it was heartbreak as they were kicking away their losing bonus point and nothing out of the game for Toulouse at all. And that actually dropped Toulouse out of 6th because La Rochelle did due diligence and actually racked up their 3rd win on the bounce.
One relenting win for Toulouse, which came against the table toppers Bordeaux. So yeah, I mean, they're on a really bad run again, the Toulouse. Throughout this run, it hasn't been enough, that one win that they were able to pick up to prevent them from dropping out of that top 6 entirely. Incredible scenes, really. And just incredible scenes right across the comp this week as so many of the teams at the top of the table slipped results to the teams at the bottom of the table. Everything narrows up table-wise. It's all up for grabs, really. So many teams, even teams down in 10th like POW after their great win, if they go on a run, could well be in that top 6 and in that barrage.
Very bunched.
One thing that did happen last week that was significant was Toulon got a big away win in the relegation battle over in Biarritz.
Yeah, Biarritz looks like they might be buried as well. It might be a scrap between Perpignan and Toulon and a few others towards the death, but it looks like Biarritz are just struggling with the pace of it up here. But yeah, good machinations, and it's just a really good tournament this year, to be honest. A lot of teams with notions, and that kind of cluster around the chopping point of the barrage is heating up, really, because there are only a few regular season rounds to go. This weekend they actually do take a break this weekend, but there are 2 rescheduled games, both from rounds 14 and 17 respectively. On Saturday they're both going to be prime time games, so 8:05 kickoffs. On Saturday we have Montpellier v Toulon, that's the round 14 game rescheduled, and on Sunday then Clermont v Bordeaux.
And Bordeaux now with this away trip to Clermont to try
Clermont in good form themselves, haven't really scored.
They're odds on now to go on a similar top of the table downward spiral slump to what Toulouse have just done. It's crazy, the poison of first place taking hold in the top Quatorze. In the URC we had a weekend of blowouts. So we did. It was
thoroughly devoid of intrigue until the very last game on the Sunday, where Ospreys managed a 27-22 win over Zebra. That was as tight as it got in the URC this weekend.
It was looking decidedly Japanese on the opening few days. Edinburgh smashing Connacht. On paper a good game. Connacht take an 8-0 lead, then concede 56 straight against the magical Scots, with Blair Kinghorn and co running the show, running them left, right and centre. Connacht no answers on the defensive end, beaten and bullied by the end of it.
And
impressive.
The other Friday night game, Ulster looking very impressive, dismantling Cardiff as well up in the Kingspan, 48 points to 12, a massive scoreline.
Robert Balakoon keeps going, pick me. Looking very, very good in that one. Leinster also smashed Benetton in Treviso. Munster did likewise, 61-17 to Leinster over Benetton, 64-3 to Munster over Dragons, the 2 Irish heavyweights. No issues with those minnows in those games. And then the other quite surprising blowout was the Scarlets putting it on Glasgow to the tune of 35-10.
That was a big result. Scarlets looking good just in advance of their trip away to South Africa as well. That's good timing for a run of form as well, and obviously unfortunate for Glasgow.
Speaking of which, the games this weekend I am really looking forward to in the URC. This is as good a week in the URC as we've had in ages, and while it is a pantheon of test footy to watch, if you do get a chance to tune into the URC, there's some great stuff. What we have is Ulster hosting Leinster, first of all, in one of those 2 Irish heavyweight sides going at it. That's second place Ulster hosting first place Leinster. Just a brilliant game of rugby that is determinative of how things will go at the top of the table. And outside of that, finally we go to South Africa, and we're going to have the four South African sides hosting the European sides. That's just great to see. Sharks hosting the Scarlets starting on Friday at 5 p.m. That's going to be a great game. Scarlets obviously in good form. Sharks with Lecanio Am and the boys and Khaleesi will fancy that at home. The Bulls hosting Munster. Really curious to see how that one goes.
Interesting game, that one, in it. The Bulls v Munster out there in South Africa. That's going to be a massive clash. I can't just big meaty collisions going in that one, and I'm excited to see how it looks when they match up on that field.
On Sunday we have 2 games. The late one, the Stormers hosting Zebra. Probably not too much intrigue there. Zebra just not able to hang. The Lions against Cardiff, though, is interesting.
That's a potentially very pretty game. They both like to run in tries, sometimes for their own team, sometimes not.
And on recent evidence, looking at that Lions show in Dublin against Leinster, the Lions look to have gotten some stuff together and might be better than their their terrible 2-8 record suggests.
Yes, indeed. Well, they currently sit at 14th in the table, and with 5 Vels on the bounce. But like that game in the RDS, they showed a lot of good pedigree. Their scrum was very good, and they'll fancy getting after, particularly at home, getting after the soft underbelly of a Cardiff side, shorn of its internationals as well. So
very interesting to see how the Safa sides go at home. So the URC possibly the highlight of this coming weekend. And we then turn our attention to the Premiership. There were some games. The Harlequins beat the Falcons 24-10. That was a pretty stock result. Bath came back from a major deficit after Bristol picked up a red card to pip it at the death, 29-27. Yeah. Great for Bath, who are starting to put a run together, and terrible for Bristol.
More pain for Pat Lowndes Bristol. It's been a tough old season, so it has.
Gloucester beat Northampton 35-30 with an awesome Louis Rees-Sammet try.
They did.
London Irish put it on Worcester Warriors 43 points to 12. 4 Argentinians on the board for London Irish.
And one Duhan van der Merwe fend that results in him missing the rest of the Six Nations as well. He got himself red carded for a stiff arm that was, a stiff forearm.
Yes, indeed. Exeter took a 19-point lead against Sale, but were pegged back for a losing bonus point and failed to secure a try bonus point of their own.
19-12 that finished. Good resilience from the Sale Sharks, but they'll wonder what happened in that first half. But the game of the weekend was undoubtedly the top of the table clash out in Sarries, whatever they call it now, the StoneX Stadium that it is. But Sarries 34, Leicester Tigers 27. Damn fine game. It was a really high quality game. Some really good showings. One of the downsides was Mako Vunipola going off injured, and they did say that it didn't look particularly good. He was icing his ankles, so he could be out for a protracted period. But some great plays on either side.
Sarries offense, baby.
Sarries
it's back.
Offense, don't sleep on it. It looks very, very dangerous. But similarly, Leicester don't go anywhere, even when they're out of a contest. Their stick-to-itiveness is very admirable, and bringing guys like Ndolo off the bench is also very admirable.
And Visa as well. They definitely were able to arrest some of the Saracens' momentum with some big introductions off the bench, but they were outplayed for the most part in this game. They weren't able to hang. Saracens were able to resist their power game with some great showings from the likes of Vincent Koch and Tim Swinson. Leicester just weren't able to get on top of them physically. Then the Sarries just showed their quality of their offense in that midfield. The likes of Lazowski.
Some very nice kicking from Lazowski as well, actually stroking them over from all kinds of angles and distances.
And one of the decisive plays of the game as well was on towards the tail end of the first half, around 30 minutes, when they scored a great try through Alex Lewington on the wing, and Murray Valu decided to just land on him. And it was finally penalised. It was interesting. Like you see that happen quite a bit when a side scores a try. Then rarely is it pinned. A guy will come in with his knees or just land on him or do something ugly. But Murray Valu, being such a big bloke and so obvious with it, was called up on it, and the sanction was hugely punitive. He was given a yellow card. It was determined that the offence happened after the grounding of the try, which it did, so the game restarted with a penalty on the halfway line, which Lazowski duly chipped over the bar for a 10-point try.
A rarely seen 10-point try, but a deserved one.
Nailed the touchline conversion, brought the ball back to the halfway, and nailed that kick as well.
That was awesome stuff, and a big swing in the game at that point. And it's good to see that. It's one of my least favourite plays in rugby. Normally it is the knees. I would love to see it punished more often than it is, but just the kind of petulant sliding in to put a cheap shot in on the try scorer, even though you know you're not going to get at the ball or prevent the try being scored. Like some people think, like some schools have taught on rugby are like, oh no, you just toughen up, that's part of the game, you get a shot in on the try scorer, that's good. I think it's ugly, terrible loser play that I would like to see punished with more 10-point tries like this, and it was an appropriate punishment and a costly one for Leicester.
Absolutely. And shout out to Nick Tompkins as well, who obviously we were talking about in the context of the Wales game, but he was
everywhere, man of the match, and deserved for that. Like there were awesome stuff, great passing, great attack, great on the defense as well. As his hits are getting much cleaner and more powerful as well. He's in good form.
Totally class player, and Wales' great hope and Ireland's great hope in this game against France. And also shout out to Richard Barrington, who had to come on for Mako early doors. Had a class game himself.
That's true. Did very well. So all of that leaves the picture. Leicester still adrift at top with 71 points, but Sarries pegged them back. They get up to 59 themselves.
And they have a game in hand.
They do have a game in hand as well, so narrowing that gap, but Leicester still looking comfy. Quins then on 58 and Exeter on 54 make up the current kind of complexion of the final four, but London Irish sniffing around on 53,
with
Gloucester
a game in hand
with a game in hand, Gloucester also a game in hand on 52, Sale game in hand on 47. Those three are probably the ones in the reckoning. Northampton and Wasps are back a bit further back on 43.
It's getting very late in the day,
probably late in the day, and then Bristol as well, still in 10th after that defeat. So probably, it's getting into
6-11 now. Bristol
6-11, very tough way to back up what was a stellar season last year. They were killed by those Quins, so they were. This weekend we do have a full round of fixtures going ahead. On Saturday we have Worcester hosting Exeter. That's a 2:30 kickoff unusually. The rest of them are all 3 o'clock kickoffs. Sale play Gloucester, Leicester host London Irish, and Newcastle Falcons host Sarries, all on Saturday. And then on Sunday Bristol host Harlequins and Northampton host Wasps. There's a bye week this week for Bath. Grand old stuff.
But Europe is not the only place where rugby is going ahead.
True.
Rugby is going on all over the world, as we now find out. We're going to head first to the States for Major League Rugby, where there were a good few games last weekend. We're going to start with the Seattle Seawolves against the NOLA Gold, which happened in Seattle. And the games that happen in Seattle are often the ones worth watching. And there's great coverage there. They do a good job producing it at the Rugby Network in conjunction, I believe, with Fox over there. And they just do a great job putting it on. And the atmosphere in Seattle is actually great. They get a good little crowd. It's a nice little stadium they have. They're a more knowledgeable rugby crowd. They're actually kind of reacting to refs and calls and things. It's not one of these kind of, what is rugby? They're passing it. Ooh, I don't know. They're not responding to refereeing decisions with puzzlement, but more outrage.
Yes, which
shows they're growing and they're learning. This was a brilliant game of rugby. It finished 25-24 to the NOLA, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, the Seattle came back and scored a worldie of a try, going coast to coast to take a 24-22 lead. Then down the other end of the pitch, NOLA managed to work a penalty and took the lead 25-24. Then Seattle got the ball back off the restart, and I swear to God, the worst case of I'm not going to take a drop goalitis I've ever seen. No,
indeed. They just went left and right. Who was it? I can't remember. It was a backup out half. And he kept folding. Like, it was just frustrating. We were watching it and it was just, he was right under the sticks. The forwards had done the hard work. He just needed to drop in the pocket and he never did. And ultimately it was him who ended up getting isolated on the
Jared Whippy.
And he was whipping too many passes instead of standing back and
it was
slotting
crazy.
a kick.
Like, they were about 5 yards out from the line, clock in the red,
82 minutes.
82 minutes. Tight pitch, small pitch, like it's just all weather surface as well. So just really, really easy to drop back 10 meters, and it was a chip shot, drop goal for the win. Crowd would have gone berserk, and instead consistently, like, we were watching him go drop, and he kept just listing off to one side, off to another. His pack would work him back, and then he listed again. He never even thought about dropping for the drop goal. He had about 2 minutes to do it, and ended up, as you say, trucking it into contact and losing the ball. Great win for NOLA. Tough for Seattle to drop to back-to-back losses, but really they've no one but themselves to blame.
You can't. It's crazy to watch. Not since, obviously the All Blacks have had moments like that where they were citing it and going we don't even look at the drop goal as an option, but they gotta know it's an option in that circumstance. It could have gone one way. Game management, but NOLA Gold escaped Seattle with a valuable victory. Other results then, 69-22 win for the Utah Warriors over the Dallas Jackals in quite a one-sided showing. And then Rugby ATL hosted the Houston SaberCats, and that was a good game. 29-22 win for ATL in that one, but Houston SaberCats definitely given as good as they got. Then another good game, Austin Gilgroni's 22, LA Giltini's 9. But the story from that one, Giltini's went 9-0 up. They were starting a 42-year-old, their coach, at number 10 because they were so shorn of 10 options that they decided to just give him the jersey. And to be fair to him, he started the game brilliantly.
This is Oren IE, who was actually World Sevens Player of the Year in 2005. And they were saying it was also a part of a consistent member of the Blues Super Rugby team as a winger in the early aughts. He was featuring in the first ad for Super 12 way back in 1999. This is an old school dude. He's 42 and he joined them last year as a skills coach, has become skills and assistant coach, and because of an injury crisis at fly half and presumably doing some fun stuff in training, decided, hey, I'm going to slot in and play 10. And you know what? He was great. He was
first
really
half
good.
was
he
really
was throwing
good.
fizzing passes. He got them a 9-0 lead. but eventually it came unstuck and they lost the game 22-9.
They did.
Injury crisis just killing the Giltinis at the moment, but it was one of the stories of the weekend.
It was, it was great fun to see him and take to it again, and yeah, that was definitely one of the stories they were highlighting from that one. But the Gilgronis looking very impressive, and they rolled on through the defending champions for a shortcut there. Then another game, Rugby New York hosting New England Free Jacks, and that New England Free Jacks team just keep going with good momentum. 38-29 away win in New York is a very valuable one, very good. And meanwhile, the San Diego Legion stuttered a little, but ultimately got a 24-12 win over Old Glory DC, who are still struggling with the intensity of MLR in general.
Yes, Dallas and DC both rock bottom of their conferences, 0-5, and really they'll have to wait to meet each other before either of them sees a win. It does look that way. Meanwhile, at the top of the Eastern Conference, you have Rugby ATL on 16 points, New England Free Jacks on 15, and New York on 15. So those three in that mix. A bit further back on 9, Toronto Arrows, and then further back on 6, Nola Gold. That's a very good conference. All of those are very competent teams, but just at the top at the minute are Rugby ATL, New England, and New York. And then in the Western Conference, Austin Gilgronis, who are 5-0 and looking very, very good. They are top of that with 23 points. Then San Diego Legion in second on 20. Seattle Seawolves on 15 are in third, and the current ones in the wildcard spot. Back-to-back losses, though.
Back-to-back losses, and just behind them, Houston Sabercats on 12, and the defending champs LA Giltinis on 9 points, and the Utah Warriors for finalists as well on 8 points. Very competitive stuff going on in that through 5 rounds, and the dynamic is interesting.
It sure is, and it's a fun competition to watch on the rugbynetwork.com for free, all on demand. Very, very much worth watching on a nice kind of on a different time scale to the other rugby as well. So it's like there's some live rugby on. When we're over here, it's kind of midnight time. If you're starved of rugby, you can stick on some American
if you're still
stuff.
Up late editing podcasts or whatnot. It's a good thing to have on in the background.
Absolutely.
This weekend there are a few of the games going on. Rugby ATL are hosting Austin Gilgronis on Saturday. Very good game. New England Free Jacks hosting Toronto Arrows. Those are the Saturday games. And then on Sunday you have Houston Sabercats hosting Seattle Seawolves, Dallas Jackals hosting the Nola Gold, Rugby New York and the San Diego Legion, and the LA Giltinis welcome the Utah Warriors in a repeat of the final, isn't it? That's a final from last year.
No, the ATL last year. Utah were in the semi-final.
They were in semi-final. That was it. I know it was ATL and Utah, that tight game I was remembering instead. But a few good games that in stateside in the MLR this weekend. But it's not only the MLR that we're looking at. We will also look at action from Japan, and it's the first time since we've been covering Japan that it was actually tighter games in the Japanese fixtures than in the URC ones, but there were a few tight ones this weekend.
They still included Suntory with a 56-17 win, and the Wild Knights with a 66-10 win.
Yes, the subplot of the Suntory one was that DMAC grabbed himself a nice hat-trick in that one. Meanwhile, the Chiefs were struggling to kick goals to win the game back in Super Rugby, but to digress on that. The other games, you had Kubota Spears 30, Shizuoka Blue Revs 24, Toyota just edging the Shining Arcs 31-22. Brave Lupus actually 2 21-18 games between Brave Lupus and Cannon Eagles, and the Black Rams and the Green Rockets to round out the weekend. So a couple of tight wins in that one, a couple of good games, but the picture doesn't change that much. Kubota Spears, Suntory, Wild Knights and Cannon Eagles are the ones in the playoff spots at the moment.
And you do
maybe Verblitz might get in, but it's looking like that.
Yeah, and you do have Suntory facing Kubota Spears on Friday. That'll be the game of the weekend. Toyota also facing the Wild Knights, looking for a shot there. And then the Cannon Eagles facing Red Hurricanes, Kabelco Steelers facing Black Rams, Shining Arcs facing the Shizuoka Blue Revs, and Brave Lupus versus Green Rockets. And there is also always some decent attacking footy to be watched from the rugby out in Japan.
Some great players that you kind of forgot you knew.
That's right. Exactly. The league of that's where he is.
That's effectively it.
Yeah, indeed. But we are also going to look at yet another league that has taken our attention last year, the return of the Superliga Americana de Rugby, or the SLAR competition.
Yes.
This is a joy to have it back. The teams competing in it, 6 teams in South America, Selknam from Chile, Olympia Lions from Paraguay, the Jaguares from Argentina, the Cafeteros Pro from Colombia, Penarol from Uruguay, and Cobras Brazil from Brazil.
Yes.
That's just a great colourful competition, and South America is still trying to get a leg up on starting their own comparable competition to the MLR.
Indeed, no, absolutely, and it is being floated effectively by Argentina as well. There's a draft system. There are a few Argentinian players being spread around, but also Uruguay have been coming as well, and that they were the second side last year was that Uruguayan side Penarol. They were given a few good games to the Jaguares. Jaguares are obviously going in as defending champions, but hopefully that picture will change, and hopefully you'll see the Cafeteros Pro be a bit more competitive as the draft thing starts to kick in, as the seasons roll on and they try and balance it out a bit. But definitely a good competition, and that is kicking off this weekend.
It is indeed. There were suggestions, by the way, for this league that a second Argentinian team, I think we talked about it in other news a while back in the News of the Week, that there was going to be a second Argentinian team. That kind of got put on hold. There's just financial issues at play. So it's still very much treading water. Like, I always think that these competitions are better when you can get multiple teams from multiple countries to stop it from being kind of like a default A competition internationally. Like, you do want to get some kind of sense of club identity and some sense of locality to it as well.
Definitely.
But at the same time, it's just great to have it continue on and still existing, given all that's happened in the last couple of years. And there are going to be some fun games, and as you say, we hope that it gets closer. It's not going to be a home and away competition. It's just going to be a one game neutral venue. It's going to be hosted by Santiago, Buenos Aires and Montevideo, between those cities, and needless to say, the semi-finals and finals will take place in Montevideo as well.
That's
as
right.
Always happens
Stage
in South
one
America.
we're opening, kind of rotating between Buenos Aires and Santiago, and actually Valparaiso as well is where this little stadium is for this weekend, I believe, is in the Estadio Elias Figueroa is where they're listed for this weekend. That's where all of them are going, and they're actually on the same day as well, so that's a serious little list of fixtures. The opening of the season is going to be Selknam of Chile versus Olympia Lions from Paraguay. Then the Jaguares begin their defence against Los Cafeteros Pro of Colombia, and then Penarol from Uruguay face Cobras Brazil of Brazil. And that's all three of those games happening in the same stadium in Chile and happening back to back to back, so that's pretty exciting.
And we do need them to slowly but surely move from blowouts just to keep the intrigue going, because obviously if you buy a ticket to go see a triple header and it's blowout, that's can
not
get
ideal. Fatiguing fairly quickly unless there's some really pretty tries, but even then
indeed. The competition runs all the way through the end of May, some finals on May 28th.
That's right. And
so
it is, I think it's semi-final, is it, or is it just final?
Semi-final.
Yeah,
so the semi-finals May 21st, final May 28th.
There
so
you go.
2 teams will be eliminated in the
regular season, as it were, before the postseason.
Right.
But yeah, an exciting comp, and I'm excited. I just like to see it find its feet. It was the same remark about the Rugby Europe Super Cup when it was in its infancy, and it's trying to get that first season under the belt, and there were difficulties between COVID and whatnot, but they have got that season under the belt. Now we're into season 2 mode, and like the MLR has gone from strength to strength now in its 4th iteration, and it's hope to see SLAR kick on like that, and slowly but surely balancing out these teams and kind of working out the hiccups on it. But good luck to it in this 2022 vintage, and to all teams involved, and hope to see some good rugby.
No question. And we're going to move on now and take a look at the Super Rugby Pasifika, which was rattling on last weekend, and I did for those keeping track, bite the bullet and pay for their little Sansar TV service. So we've been making use of that, and we did watch plenty of the games last weekend, given it was the off week as well. So it started with Moana Pasifika losing out 12 points to 33 to the Crusaders.
Doesn't tell the full story. They were very good in this game, and
that kind of does tell the full story in terms of like that's a fine result against the Crusaders.
There are many a team that'll do much worse than that against the Crusaders. No, they opened by soaking a load of pressure and then ultimately striking with no possession, no territory, but a beautiful sequence that led to the opening score.
It was so awesome to see them take the lead in that game. It was just incredible.
I was very excited when I was watching that, and a great start to their campaign, because obviously the first 2 weeks they didn't get to take the field. It's as tough as they come facing the Crusaders, but baptism of fire, they're ready for anyone.
Then dry track, empty stadium, Forsyth Bar in New Zealand facing the Crusaders. About as tough as it gets in Super Rugby, and to ship a 21-point defeat in your opening game and still record 2 tries and show some good defence Like, I actually think they're in a grand spot now.
I liked the look of their halfbacks as well, and they had Lele Afano off the bench, but they also had McClutchy starting, and like they were moving the pill pretty well, and as you say, defending very well. And I'm excited for their prospects. But the big news from the other two new teams was Fiji and Drua getting the first W in their first home game against the Rebels, 31-26. But that score was padded by a late Rebels try that it didn't feel like they deserved, because the Drua were good value for this win. They were much better than the Rebels.
They were absolutely much better. They had quick kick tap tries. Madawalu in there was awesome. They were an absolute joy to play. They were an absolute joy to watch. They were comfortably the better team, and by the end, the Rebels, like the Fijian Drua's offense had stuttered in the opening couple of weeks. It's still not perfect, but it got enough off, and they had some good quick taps and they had some good instincts. But their defense is solid, and the Rebels' offense is nada. And it was the Rebels who were the ones who were floundering and not able to attack by the end, and the Drua were comfortable.
They were right until that last sequence where they kind of dialed out and let them go from one end of the pitch to the other with some offloads and stuff, which was kind of fun to see. I was like, the Rebels can offload and do stuff. But the Rebels' offense will have to get the finger out, because the task only gets tougher from here, and they've yet to record a win, and they look very much bottom of that Aussie conference kind of thing. They look like they're going to struggle, but doesn't take any of the gloss away from the Drua. They were struggling to get on the board in the first few weeks. 31, they're in the 30 club.
They were 14-0 down in this game after 35 minutes, then picked up a card, and then by 53 minutes they were leading 15-14. You wouldn't have saw it coming. And they just kept going from there. They finally found their rhythm. They realised they were comfortable in the game. And hopefully it's the beginning of bigger and better things, because obviously a 5-point win against the Rebels, while great for the Drua to be on the board in their first season, it does only get tougher from there. It
does, but it's the first weekend of real proper optimism about these new teams, because obviously COVID things had belayed the Moana Pasifika, and then the first 2 weeks it was tough for the Drua, so it was great to see the Drua get on the board, and Moana Pasifika giving the Crusaders a good rattle as well. Those were two great games to kick it off. We also had another great contest in Oz. Western Force 16, Queensland Reds 29. Really good quality game here. The Force came to play. They were ferocious. They were everything you associate with them. They're passionate. Great to see the kind of intensity. But
great to be back in Perth.
See a blue back for the first time ever. But also just good to see the Reds kind of digging it out in that environment. They looked good quality, and then the ability to spring Tupou on them in the second half, and really did kind of change the dynamic of the game.
They dug in like half. Price Sammy got his card, and they were Force led 16-15 with a man up with 20 minutes to play, and the Reds dug it out, and they dug it out. Not only did they dig it out, they dug it out and then came back and dug it out again and got themselves a try bonus.
They did. They did it in style. JOC looked very, very assured at 10. Even guys as well on the wing like Pataya were dangerous all day long as well.
Wilson and McWright, I thought, the two back rowers, they were everywhere.
Indefatigable throughout. They were just very, very just labour intensive approach to the game, and outworking their opponents, which was tough to do against the Force away from home.
But the Force are a good side, and they've taken a couple of tough losses now to the Brumbies and the Reds, but definitely great to see them mixing it in that.
100%.
Probably the most compelling match of the weekend though was between the Blues and the Chiefs.
Great game.
I mean, this was a brilliant game, very, very close. The Blues dug it out after being outplayed at times, particularly up front. Actually, Sam Cane was
awesome.
Looking, he was everywhere.
Doing his All Black captain credentials, no harm at all. He
was up against Papali'i, who was capturing the Blues, and there was hands down won that matchup.
He did win that matchup, no doubt. But
had Sawakula just skittling folks. He was everywhere.
Also had Bowden Barrett returning to the field was a good dynamic. His first Super Rugby game in quite a while, but he came off the bench for the Blues too.
Yeah, indeed. But Sawakula at number 8 was also skittling people. Nanai Satoro on the left wing for the Chiefs, he was lighting things up, scored a wonderful try on half time, and they were outplaying the Blues. But to the Blues' credit, they came back, and Satutu, having been outplayed by Sawakula despite being an All Black and Sawakula not being an All Black, did come back into the game, had some huge plays in that second half. Likewise, Rico Ioane, Caleb Clark
came alive.
The introduction of Offa Tuangafasi changed the game because
scrum
the scrum changed.
On a dime straight away. It did.
And it was just one great set, really, that stole it from the Chiefs. Were in the lead throughout. They were looking like they were going to edge it. but it was one great set that the Blues found, and they finally got Talia in the corner after nothing fell for him all day.
It was not really breaking for Talia all day, but then he finally got on the end of one, and it was richly deserved.
And
ballsy
touchline conversion from Perifetta as well.
Absolutely crucial in that instance, because by contrast,
that should have been the end. Yeah. That should have been the end of the game. Perifetta's touchline conversion. The Blues now, they just have 30 seconds to kill, and then Tom Robinson intervenes with one of the most two of the most brain dead, crazy, how to throw a game away in 30 seconds moments. They were doing their little forward hit up. They just had about one phase to go.
Game that you'll never get away with if Nigel Owens is holding the whistle. He'll pin you. But you don't even have to get a harsh one. He genuinely went ahead of the man. It was accidental offside. It wasn't
sealing. It was on the carry. He was trying to latch to the ball carrier and just walked ahead of him and ended up really exaggerated it to the point where he was right in front of him.
For Robinson, if you know Robinson, big ginger mop ahead.
Had a great game.
He had a great game up to that point, but big ginger head, you're not going to miss him out there. He stands out. It was very obvious, and it was a penalty to the Blues. But that was in their own territory, so it was not necessarily curtains. But then at the ensuing line out from when they kicked at the corner, he just jumped across the line and played the man.
Same man again, determined to rectify his mistake. He instead compounded it
by coughing up a chance from the 15-metre line, or from in 15 as well, because it was from the set piece, for Bryn Gatland to step up to nail the clutch winning kick in the game, except he didn't, because he's Bryn Gatland. He's not Damien McKenzie. Damien McKenzie was busy scoring hat-tricks in the beach rugby in Japan at the time.
Yeah, they spent all last season winning games in scenarios exactly like that, stealing it at the death with a late DMAC kick, but unfortunately
they didn't have
Gatland couldn't repeat the feat.
So Robinson was the most relieved man in the ground at that particular moment when that kick slid to the left and wide, but ultimately that led to a good win for the Blues.
The Hurricanes also saw off the Highlanders. Didn't get a chance to see that game. It was 21-14 to the Canes. Highlanders getting the losing bonus point, but again sliding to it. I think they were saying it was their worst start to the season since 2013.
Yeah, they are struggling.
Then the Brumbies beat the Waratahs in another competitive game.
27-20. They survived a bit of a comeback from the Taz, late comeback from the Taz to get back into it apparently. Very, very good to see the Taz and the Force a bit more competitive, and just that Aussie conference getting a bit tighter.
Absolutely.
Now if the Rebels can get up as well.
Well, the Taz and the Force do play each other this weekend. That's the Sunday game. The Reds also host the Drua, so the Drua will have a tough task trying to back up that win last week. The Moana Pasifika travel to play the Hurricanes. That'll also be tough for them, but hopefully they can give it a rattle. And on Friday, the Blues host the Highlanders. That'll be really a must-win at this stage for the Highlanders. The Rebels host the Brumbies and will likely lose that game. And then the game of the weekend is the Crusaders Chiefs El Clasico. And this really,
absolutely, that is a great contest always, and I'm excited to see that one. But then similarly, Queens and Reds, Fiji and Drew, a good game. Taz v Force, as you say, a bit of a doubt over the Hurricanes v Moana Pasifika game that's meant to be on Saturday, as there is COVID in the Hurricanes camp, and that it's not specified who or how many, but they do know that they do have COVID in the environment, is what was said. So that is a concern for the Hurricanes, obviously, and for Moana Pasifika, who
just don't get to play any games. Just the Crusaders. Every other game cancelled until the reverse fixture against the Crusaders. Yes, but also, not to finish club footy there, kicking off this weekend is Super Rugby Aupiki.
Yes.
A new competition for women's club footy, which is going to take place really just over a few weeks. In fact, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Well, it's all throughout March, and they're kind of short turnarounds as well. I think games start on Thursday, and the next ones are on Tuesday, so quick enough turnarounds. Only 4 teams. It's kind of what New Zealand are saying is that it'll serve as a stepping stone between what is the existing Farah Palmer Cup and then the Black Ferns as well. So they're kind
of a bit like NPC, their usual club footy that does go on in the women's game and the men's game. Super Rugby was the step up, and this is hopefully going to function similarly.
What they want to have it. Aupiki actually translates to the ascent to the uppermost realm. That's what Aupiki means.
It's also what the Black Ferns are looking to do come the year's end. So obviously, for the point of view of this year, it functions as high level a trial match as they can have.
As also like a boot camp kind of get yourself. This is what are England and France up to? Let's get up to that level, because that was the end of year tour for the Black Ferns. Definitely opened their eyes.
Absolutely. There are 4 teams in total. The 3 northern teams are going to be just as the Super Rugby franchises: Blues, Chiefs, and Hurricanes. Correct. And then the South Island is just going to have the one team. Obviously, the Crusaders and Highlanders, both from like Otago and then Canterbury, but they'll merge for the point of view of this competition and be named Matatu.
Yes,
and so Matatu are
governed by the Crusaders, I believe, but will encompass both those regions as well. And Matatu is the name they've gone with for it. All 4 sides are going to contract 28 players for the inaugural season as well, so there will be paid participation, which is why it's so exciting. A new professional league. They'll be paid for participating within the tournaments, and all players will be on professional or semi-professional contracts as well. So it's just good to see. The debut season will comprise of 3 rounds, all 4 teams playing each other once, and the top 2 teams will play each other in a one-off final on either March 26th or 27th. It depends. Obviously, scheduling in New Zealand has been up in the air, and they're reticent to be committed to it.
It's all positive except for the fact that already we've had a cancelled game. The opening inaugural game between Hurricanes and Blues is cancelled. It's going to be declared a 0-0 draw. They're not even going to replay it. So unfortunately, COVID's schedule rearing its horrible head again. And it would be remiss of us not to mention as well, just and we haven't been covering it probably incorrectly, but the Premier 15s is ongoing as well in Women's Professional League in England, which is itself 10 teams, 10 pro teams in the league, being led unsurprisingly by Saracens. Saracens are top of that table. Bristol then follow, Exeter, Queen's, Wasps, then Loughborough, Gloucester, Worcester, Sale and Durham make up the Premier 15s table, and that is ongoing. They're 16 matches into their season and have quite a few left to go. They play 18 total, and then they'll have a semi-final and final as well.
It's a huge factor in what has made England so successful so recently in the women's game, and it is what has prompted the Super Rugby Aupiki kind of Black Ferns kind of getting their finger out and going, why aren't we paying the women? Why aren't we having professionalism in the women's game? We should. And that's kind of the realisation people are coming to across the board, is that we should be taking the women's game more seriously. It's a good product, and I'm really rooting for this Super Rugby Aupiki to hit the ground running and become like that Premier 15s, which has already become a really good product and is getting good attendances and just putting on a really good show for the women's game, and granting a lot of avenues for women from fringe countries and from other countries. I know a lot of Irish women are contracted in the Premier 15s as well. It's great for the sport.
Great to see. Absolutely, there needs to be an avenue for pro women's rugby. But with that does wrap up all of the domestic rugby going around all of the world. And I know that's not entirely true, but gee whiz, do you really want us to find another league? What's going on in the Kazakhstan league? No, that's lots of leagues covered, and we are going to wrap up the show now with, as we always do, the rugby news of the week. And there's actually a bit of an Irish flavour to the rugby news of the week. There's quite a few stories coming out of Ireland. We're going to open with just this news about this major change to the women's game in Ireland.
Sticking with that women's game theme, I suppose, pivoting in. It was a result of, it was postponed as a review because of COVID and whatnot, but the review of Ireland's failure to qualify for the World Cup in that cutthroat European repechage that saw us falling foul of Scotland and ultimately falling short of qualification. And it's also, that's the micro, but the macro has been just the descent from what was a really good, powerful team like a decade ago to not contributing to the top level of the Six Nations every year and just kind of falling by the wayside. And there was an independent report that had some damning I think produced 30 recommendations which have been taken on board by the IRFU, and the IRFU have actually apologised as well openly. I think it was Kevin Potts, who's the IRFU chief executive now, was very receptive to the findings of the report and very apologetic of what the IRFU had been up to over the last few years.
Yes, indeed, and they're including their announcement a blockbuster increase in funding to the tune of €830,000.
€830.
Could you imagine? No, indeed. Which hopefully will go some way to fixing the problems. A noticeable change in tone from the IRFU, considering what had happened last year, and notable as well as that the day before the report was released, Anthony Eddy, villain number 1, who had been head of sevens and women's rugby
for no good reason
in Ireland, the Aussie. He'd been in charge of the role since 2014, which I think was the year that Ireland won the Grand Slam in the women's game.
It's very hard to chart any progress from there.
He stepped down just in the day before the report was released, after he had irked just about everybody.
Everyone in the women's game here can't stand him.
The women rugby players, current players, past players, I think referees, they all penned a letter saying that the game is being neglected in the country and the facilities aren't good enough, yada yada yada. And he just responded by saying, I reject the overall tenor of your letter, and then he had some like kind of dry, terrible little remarks, there's slurry spreading or something, and I can't actually. That's not right. But he had some derogatory comments to say about it. Was dismissive overall about the report.
But it's also compounded by there have been some very notable faux pas. We've covered some of them, like the Interpro incident of having Connacht play Munster in Donnybrook and forcing them to change by the bins in a tent because of ridiculous kind of
COVID restrictions.
That was COVID restrictions, not allowing them to have a shower but rather go to the bins, like those kinds of damning instances. And also our own hosting of the last Women's World Cup, which was botched pretty much. I didn't think it was a good job. They had it all out in UCD and it wasn't very good. Didn't
penetrate the zeitgeist
at all. Didn't use Raven. It didn't use some of the good stadia that were around. Didn't spread it around at all. Just didn't publicise it. Very often you were finding, I was hearing people say they couldn't get tickets, and then you'd watch the game and there's no one in attendance and you're like, what's going on here? A bizarre sequence. It hasn't been good for the women's game in the last few years, and it has reached its denouement, and hopefully a turning point is reached now with that not qualifying for the World Cup being the straw that broke the camel's back. But hopefully optimistic times for the women's game in Ireland, which is the first time I can say that for quite a while.
Yes, indeed. It seems like a noticeable change in path finally towards the sensible direction from the IRFU. But sticking with IRFU and sticking with kind of administration, we also bring the news that Mick Dawson is to step down as CEO of Leinster at the end of 21 years in the role. He's going to step down.
Good pedigree. He's done a good job.
Yeah, I mean, he won't be a familiar name to people outside of Leinster and Ireland, but he has been a stalwart.
CEO for the last 21 years, and you just think back to the last 21 years of Leinster and Ireland, it's been progress more than regress.
Indeed, he was a Lansdowne manager for a few years, but in 2001 got the position of CEO in Leinster, and he has overseen just an extraordinary evolution into professionalism and obviously the most dominant, successful phase in the province's history. 4 Heineken Cups in that time, the Challenge Cup in 2013, what is now the URC on they've claimed 8 titles since Celtic League to Pro 14s and everything else. They've won 2 British and Irish Cups and 2 Celtic Cups as well. Incredibly successful in their appointments of coaches, notably Checa, Joe Schmidt, Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster. Great decisions on signings. You look at Nathewa, Nathan Hines, Brad Thorne, many more. Just to from top to bottom, an incredible job. You look at the move to the RDS that they did. They've developed that venue and made it an incredible home. Like he's just done this is kind of a personal story for us as well, because we're such big Leinster fans, but I mean, from a CEO, it's hard to get emotional about a CEO stepping down, but geez, and Mick has been at the heart of so much of what Leinster have done so well, and pretty much every decision has been a great one from him. So
it's true.
You just have to say thank you to Mick.
Hopefully,
I'd like Philip Brown has left the IRFU. He did a great job as well. Like hopefully things go seamlessly.
The wheels don't come off.
Yeah, well, this does represent a major change at the administration level of Irish and Leinster rugby, and we have to hope the next guys do the business as well.
Indeed, and carry the women's game along with it. It's definitely rejigging along in Ireland. And then sticking with Ireland as well, just in terms of contract news, Johnny Sexton has signed a contract extension up to the end of the 2023 World Cup, which is not wholly surprising, but encouraging all the same. The Leinster fly half has won 103 caps for his country so far. He will be 38 by the time the World Cup rolls around, which is a well-documented fact, tends to come up in commentary every time you watch Ireland play and Leinster play.
Yes.
But he is very much committed to making it to that World Cup and to contributing, hopefully, to Ireland winning the thing. That would be nice. But good to see Sexton still sticking around, and just what a legend.
What a legend he is indeed. And he did announce himself, this obviously for now anyway, and certainly I think from an Irish and Leinster Twitter point of view, he's saying definitively, I will finish at the 2023 World Cup. I'm delighted to be able to say it. I've been beating around the bush for 6 months, always nervous talking about the World Cup when you weren't guaranteed to be there, of course. But he's saying that's it, like the World Cup is it for me. And even if by some freak don't get picked, I'm not sticking around for the whole season. It's when the World Cup comes to a close, or when my participation in the World Cup comes to a close, I am done, and that's absolutely fair enough. The longevity of the man has been incredible.
And he owes absolutely nothing, but we're going to ask him for some more.
Absolutely. He made his debut against Fiji in November 2009. He's obviously represented Ireland at 3 World Cups, hoping to make it to 4. 2018 World Player of the Year, 2-time British and Irish Lion in successful tours in 2013 and a drawn tour in 2017. Starter in both of those tours, of course, and main contributor, in addition to winning just the 3 Six Nations titles, including a Grand Slam and 4 Champions Cups with Leinster and countless leagues as well.
Yes, the man's pedigree is undeniable. He's awesome. He's the best 10 Ireland have ever produced.
My captain.
We've produced many good 10s, but he's a cut above, and delighted with that news to see him carrying on to the World Cup. Not surprising, but still delightful to see. Then in other news, we're going to pivot away from Irish rugby because there was quite a green lens to that news at the head of it. But in the Rugby Europe Super Cup, Tel Aviv Heat have been chosen. They've been handed a spot in the playoffs as a result of the conflict in Ukraine. The Israeli side will take the place of the Russian side, NSC STM, in the playoffs next month in Portugal. Tel Aviv Heat itself played its first real home game in December, and that looked to have ended their season. They lost to the Black Lion, the big juggernauts in the team in the comp, the Georgian Black Lion.
The Sharakadze-led Behemoth. But they got some wins in Russia as well, and they definitely look a competent team. They had some interesting signings. There's a couple of Safas in there, and
they're actually coached by a Safa, Kevin Musikant, and they have guys like Josh Strauss and Nick Groom and decent players that we know
Super
well.
Rugby and Josh Strauss test footy at a high level. So they're still an exciting team, and good to see them in, and obviously good riddance to the Russian sides in for right and proper. Then just moving on as well, we have a bit of news about the international calendar this year. A bit of an update, because originally it had been planned that there were going to be 2 games in Eden Park for the Ireland tour of New Zealand, but New Zealand have changed the picture and have announced where they're going to be playing all of their games this season. So we have a bit of a preview of the All Blacks year. They're going to host Ireland first of all in Auckland, Wellington and Dunedin in that order. So Eden Park, the Cake Tin and Forsyth Bar. They're 3 Classicos. Well,
I'm okay with that. If it means we're playing them in Eden Park once rather than twice, I'm okay with that.
They're going to host the Wallabies at Eden Park as well, as they always do, just to beat them down a little bit more. And then they're also going to play Argentina, I believe, in Hamilton's Stadium Waikato, and Christchurch's Orange Theory Stadium, the Crusaders ground. That's the one that'll be used to host Los Pumas in 2. Those 2 will host Los Pumas in 2 rugby championship matches as well, because the Pumas are again apparently not going to be able to play at home. By contrast, interestingly, given that we've just decided that Australia and New Zealand play at home forever, actually there's a change this year, and New Zealand will not be hosting the Springboks. They're playing the Springboks twice in South Africa.
That's good fun.
Cape Town and Johannesburg.
That's good fun. I'm excited for those tests.
I'm already excited for those tests.
I think South Africa are just owed good sport, because that Lions tour took place with no fans, and that was a great shame. And now finally, we were saying the Pro 14 teams finally going down to the URC, and the All Blacks travelling to face South Africa on South African soil, always a massive moment in the game when that happens. So hopefully we'll get to see some seismic collisions in that one later in the year.
Yes, indeed. And then just this little aside story that has been making headlines as well, and we decided not to put it into the Wales-France preview itself, just given you don't want to cloud it with this talk, especially not knowing the squads as we do. But it's one that we'll definitely keep an eye on, because it's interesting that this guy, Professor John Fairclough, who is a leading surgeon who had previously worked with the Welsh Rugby Union, he was saying that it would be a grave mistake if Wales select Thomas Francis in the game against against France. And now you might have remembered watching the game between Wales and England, that it was early in the game, there was an English drive, an offensive drive, and Francis went in for a tackle and went careening off it, and then got back up and stumbled over.
It was kind of seen on the post pad, kind of leaning for support as well. It wasn't good. It wasn't a good look.
Went off for HIA, which, as activists pointed out, shouldn't have even happened. You don't have a HIA when you can tell that a guy is knocked out like that. HIA is irrelevant. Went off for HIA, apparently passed the HIA and came back on, which is a huge failure from the match doctor not to look at the footage and be able to say, hang on, this guy's clearly KO'd, he's not going back out there. They put him back out there and he played again until the 56th minute when he was taken off. And now this surgeon John Fairclough is saying, like, there could be a real problem if he plays again and gets another head knock. This is exactly the kind of thing, like, when you look at the guys who have this early onset dementia and the CTE, this is the kind of thing that's happened to them consistently in their stories, just being hauled being concussed and then being thrown back out there. That's the worst thing. It's the second or third knock that you take.
He's a prop.
Even if he doesn't take clean shots to the head, every scrummage puts pressure on the head.
Huge. It's collision first and then the pressure. So it's an interesting point, and we will keep an eye on it. It remains to be seen if Francis does take the field, but obviously Dr. Fairclough believes he should not. It's an interesting one in the context of all things going on in the game in that lawsuit that's ongoing. It's just we want to try and protect the players.
You want to make sure that the protocols are adhered to, and we think we've done a better job on it, but you got to adhere to the protocols.
Well, I think you do a better job if the protocols say this and you do this, whatever, but if you just ignore the protocols, which sometimes I'm seeing more and more of in club footy as well, pushing the boat out a bit.
Like, seen it a bit.
Guys coming back to the field where you're really going, really?
Or just guys not leaving the field. Like they should. And
indeed.
The match doctor's got to have his eyes on this stuff. You know.
It's definitely it's a massive concern, and it's a big part of rugby going forward. Just in other news then to move on, code hopping Wallabies prospect Isaiah Perezi, he's penned a new deal that will keep him in Australia till the end of 2024. He joined the Taz last year, I think. And fought his way all the way up to the Wallabies squad. Obviously, made his debut against Scotland in Edinburgh at the end of year tour. He's already making an impression. He's very dynamic,
and he's been brilliant even so far this year. He's been brilliant. He's an explosive player, really gives the Waratahs a new edge, but also he's hunting down that Wallabies jersey in 2023, and great to see them secure a quality player who could give them some real depth in that position.
Absolutely.
Then I was just going to move on. There was an interesting story revolving our long-term love affair with Christian Wade. Just a chance to give you all an update on that. He's been trying to live the American dream in the NFL, but he had some things to say about the sport of rugby union, especially in the context of holding back its stars, as he puts it. Basically saying he made the realization after the transition to kind of the glitz and glamour of American football. But he was saying things like he loves rugby, it's part of his journey, but at the same time it's very far away from elite sport in the grand scheme of things. He's saying there's so much more stuff that rugby can do to push things out there. It has a bigger platform than the NFL. It's played around the world way more, but it's been contained. There's a kind of a keep rugby a secret type of thing, and it's time that World Rugby opens itself so it can grow and develop. And it's interesting what he's saying. He's saying, like, allow players to express themselves, otherwise you're stopping people from reaching their full potential. That's how I felt, and wanting to look for more is part of the reason that he left rugby. And it's interesting, like, you'd love to get him on to expand on that, but it's like when he's talking about express himself, I assume he's actually talking about off-field stuff and about kind of the prudishness that can exist within rugby and not allowing sort of characters to develop beyond their station, if that makes sense. And that's kind of considered a thing against your team if you start acting, I guess, a bit more like a star, and like some of those crazy NFL guys do, and making a name for themselves. Yeah,
that's definitely one aspect of it. Then there's the other macro of just like it has a bigger platform, but he's talking about it's all about England this and England that, and you have to play for England and whatnot, and it's all Six Nations metric, and this is where your macro World Rugby criticisms come, and your Augustin Pichot line of like, let's blow the doors off this thing, let's kind of get things open up to the world and change the way things are, the status quo for too long. It's an interesting point, but you're right in saying it'd be nice to have him. The quote doesn't quite give enough to mine from. Like it's obviously a bugbear of his, and it's something he cited as he moved over stateside as well to try and make a go of his NFL career. But it is an interesting one. It's definitely, like, I'm sure he has more thoughts on that if you were to mine him for them.
Yeah, and just an update on his NFL career. Those who are invested in the sport might remember he made a big splash. It was 2019 when he was in the preseason for the Buffalo Bills and came on for one down, and his first touch was like a 45-yard touchdown where he just ran past everybody, and that elusive running that he can bring. But since then he's had bad luck. There was no preseason in 2020. All of those preseason games were called off because of COVID. They just played the regular season, so he wasn't able to break into the regular squad. He wasn't able to show what he could do in a match environment. And then just before last year's preseason, he picked up an injury which took him out of it. A bit of rotten luck, and now his contract is up, and they're not sure if they're going to keep him. The Buffalo Bills obviously hasn't played a snap in the regular season for them, and so his career is up in the air. It depends if the Bills keep him or if someone else wants to pick up his contract. It depends, but maybe we see him in the MLR.
He could come back to the 15-man guild.
He's 30 years old,
and I'd say he's still elusive. He's a very dangerous runner, is Christian Wade. But interesting points from him as well. And good luck to him. I hope either the NFL career or see him in the MLR. You know, I just like seeing him on the field. I hope it goes well for him.
Absolutely, yes. Lots of luck to Christian Wade. Lots of luck to all you people out there.
Indeed.
Thanks very much for tuning into the show. That was everything that we have for you. Remember, if you do like the content, all of the long form chat that we have, please be sure to share with your friends. Do like the video, that helps a lot if you can do that. Comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts on anything and everything that we've spoken about throughout the show. The main of it, the Six Nations, the Rugby Europe, all of this extra stuff that we've done after for you. Any thoughts you have, please do let us know down below. But we're going to see you next week for the climax, the preview of the last round of the Six Nations of Rugby Europe. That's going to be us coming back ready to preview that one as the early season comes to a close.
Indeed. With that, folks, I think we're going to sign off. We'll say see you next week. Good luck.
Bye.